Hello again, my beautiful audience, and welcome to another season of Pop Talk. I'm your host, Cody MacDonald. I got some poppin' for some talkin' tonight. And I'm joined today by a familiar voice who's been on this show before, Moody Boy himself, Lyle Groniger. How you doing again, buddy?
Oh, I'm moody. Thanks for asking, but I'm getting better. But thanks for having me.
But as long as the music is coming, as long as it's channeling through you, that's all that matters.
Rightfully so.
And
that fits into a theme.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a theme that's for this episode, yeah.
And making his Pop Talk debut is Mr. Joshua Weinberg.
Hello, everybody. Unfortunately, I am not a prism tasting the rainbow.
Yes, everybody, get used to the music puns for tonight. His dry music puns for the night. Just keep a counter.
Ding. So,
Hey,
what do you got for us today, Cody? What did you bring us here for? You sent us secret codes, and we don't know what any of it means.
I brought us here to start a band. Because we got a guitar player like myself, we got a bass player like you, Lyle, and we got a drummer like Josh. Let's start a band, shall we?
Okay.
All right, so to
What do you
speak,
got?
house band. Good talk.
Okay.
No. We are starting a band to be talking about another band, I guess. We're a band without the instruments. We're that powerful right now.
Wait a minute, we're not rockapella.
Rockabella, yeah.
Rockapella. How I miss thee.
I wanted to bring you guys on board today because you guys are obviously familiar with music, and I wanted to talk about my favorite band of all time, and that is Pink Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
We, all three of us, well, I guess both of you kind of spent the last month and a half binging their entire discography.
Yeah, it was an assignment you gave us. We had to listen to the entire discography by a certain date, or else you would come to our house.
Wait a minute, that wasn't in the NDA.
Oh, shit, I fucked up.
It's in the contract. You got to read the fine print. Damn it. Yes, Pink Floyd, the famous psychedelic progressive rock, blues rock, fucking. My God, I don't even know how to categorize them. They are just probably the greatest rock band of all time. One of the greatest rock bands of all time.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to be too biased. They're my personal favorite. I'll just kind of go quickly into my history before I pass it down to you guys. But I've been a Floyd fan for the past, I'd say, 6 years. I never really was introduced to them at such a young age. Very occasionally they would play on the radio back in Windsor, and if you are from Windsor, you are listening to everything that's rock and roll on every station out there, because the 80s is just still to this day jammed down your throat. Like every glam metal band from the 80s is jammed down your throat. But for some reason Pink Floyd never really played that often, which I was kind of surprised about in hindsight. And I think in grade 6, I stumbled across the movie Pink Floyd The Wall, and it stuck with me for years. The visuals, a lot of motifs in the music, and a lot of songs that later on I would be like, yep, there's a reason why these are classic songs, because they're so goddamn catchy and so resonant as well. And I kind of just like drifted away after the movie, but years later it stuck with me so much, and then I kind of claimed that I was a big Floyd fan in high school, even though I kind of wasn't. I was listening to The Wall and listening to Dark Side of the Moon. I claimed to listen to, but then for some reason in 2015, it might have been the news when the news dropped that they were releasing like a late album in 2014. That kind of made me go, "Oh, Pink Floyd! Wow, they just dropped an album, and they haven't made one in like a long time." So that kind of maybe sprung the notion on getting into them. And I'm not kidding, guys, from like the summer of 2015 to like the late spring of 2016, the following year, I was listening to nothing but Pink Floyd. Like, nothing but Pink Floyd.
Where are you now?
My commutes to work were perfect at the time. Where I was living at the time, I had a good, like, 45 to an hour transit ride where I was coming from to go to work. And I would crank out an album my whole entire commute, and it was great. And I mainly stuck with the 1970s work of the band, but since time has gone by, I gained to appreciate a lot more from like the 60s Syd Barrett era to like the post Roger Waters era as well. It just took me a lot to kind of like appreciate it for good or for bad reasons, but no, since then I've just claimed myself to be an absolute Floyd fan because I kind of just discovered them just on my own merits and my own terms, which felt nice. Josh, what was your history with Pink Floyd?
I think my first real introduction to the band was not actually through any music, but through the Simpsons episode Homerpalooza, where of course there's the inflatable pig, which is a direct nod to one of their 70s era records, which we'll be talking about. But that was sort of the gateway to me wanting to get into them a little more. I don't think it was then until 2011 when they reissued their whole discography under the Discovery box set and that whole Why Pink Floyd campaign. And that's when I started to get into them a bit. But I was also in university at the time, and I was taking a rock and popular music course, and the professor actually played two tracks from their debut record, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And those two were really interesting to me at that time because, being 19, my taste was just starting to develop. And so it's a combination of those two events that really got me into certainly their first couple of records, but I don't think it was until after their last record now at this point came out that's when I really started to gain a greater appreciation for like the post-Wall era and even some of the earlier stuff as well. Because while I had heard of Pink Floyd, this whole experiment was a really great opportunity for me to really get back into and understand why some of these records are some of the most important of all time. Because especially with British prog rock, there's Pink Floyd, there's Yes, there's Genesis, there's ELP, there's many others that are up there, and I definitely would say Pink Floyd is beat for beat at the top of the top. I mean, for me, it's that and probably Genesis for my two favorites in this general genre. Maybe King Crimson as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely King Crimson for sure. That's a good comparison actually with Genesis because that's another band that kind of like had a. I mean, I guess to say drama is sort of a harsh word to say, but between the two leads of Gabriel and Collins, it definitely changed its tune a lot more from between the 70s and the 80s era.
I mean, I would say in that case, Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins have certainly gotten along better in recent years than Waters and Gilmour have, as we'll get to. But I think stylistically, especially, they are both bands that started out in very much a simple sort of R&B almost rock direction and then gradually got more and more instrumentally demanding until a certain point when there was a lot more pop structure introduced.
Yeah, and it's funny how the band actually they refer to themselves as a pop band, which kind of makes me completely change my perception on what pop music is about. If these guys refer to themselves as like a pop band. Because on the outside, I'm sort of looking at it as I'm hearing a lot of. I mean, depending on what era you're in, I'm hearing a lot of like psychedelic. I'm hearing a lot of experimental. I'm hearing a lot of blues. I'm hearing a lot of jazz. I'm hearing a lot of soft rock. A little bit of metal, just not too much. But it's just kind of crazy how versatile they can be, and that there's a certain sound that kind of like travels its way through different leading bands throughout 30 years, I would say.
Yeah, but it's just pop to them, so.
Well, they keep it so simple. That's so funny. What about you, Lyle? What is your history with the Floyd?
Well, it all started when I was perusing through my mother's vinyl collection when I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I just found like the Wall album, and I'm like, there's no text on this, and I open it up, and it's that nice sprawling picture of the trial and the stadium and all that, and the bricks, and there was like paper, and my mother was tracing it and trying to draw it herself. So
cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, and unfortunately, that's kind of the main album I was mostly aware of at the time. I didn't really listen to their early stuff. I was aware of a few of their other songs though, like Money and Time and Learning to Fly, like a lot of their more radio friendly stuff.
Yeah.
That would come on every so often. But I think my fascination with The Wall really took off when I much like you, Cody, when I watched the film, and I was like, I really wanted to watch it because I was always like enamored by the crazy animation and the visual style, and I wanted to see it. My mom's like, no, 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 this is like Clockwork Orange. You need to be older to see it. And I was like, okay. And then I finally did. And it was different, but I liked it. And then I don't know if you guys had the pleasure of having this experience, but I did eventually get to see Roger Waters' The Wall in concert in Detroit.
I hate that you're reminding me about this.
I'm sure it's on the internet
really,
somewhere.
It is, and it was really great. Even though I was dying from a serious sickness,
Oh, no.
I was like,
Oh,
my
yeah,
body
yeah.
was my body was rejecting everything I put into it, so I was just sick as a dog that night, high fever and everything.
So
But
your body was tearing down its own wall, if you will.
I was uncomfortably numb. But yeah, I went into the show. It was excellent. Roger was there. They had all these props. They had like a 60-foot puppet of the teacher just hanging about, and I thought that was awesome because I thought his design was all amazing.
Oh,
And yeah, that was
sweet.
that I felt better after that show, so that was a good thing. But
Good.
yeah, that's mostly that was my up until the point we did this podcast. That was largely my foray into Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Well, that is quite the history. But let's go into their history as we dive into all these albums as well. So we're going to be doing
Yes.
a tier list on all of their albums. And as
Oh,
we
boy.
go through the history, we shall touch upon, I guess, our favorite tracks, a couple of noteworthy facts on it. So I guess it all began when they became a band they all came from Cambridge in the UK. And I think Nick Mason, it was Nick Mason, Richard Wright, and Roger Waters who all met in college, and they were all studying architecture. Sorry, and
Architecture.
and they all decided to join a band, and it went through a series of names, and I just realized that recently, actually, through some source. Eventually, they settled with a name, Pink Floyd, and one of Roger Waters' friends who he met in school was the late great Syd Barrett, and these two
Yes.
clicked. These two clicked as friends immediately, just through songwriting and through just them personally, just growing up, didn't have a father when they grew up most of their lives, and Syd Barrett, he's the front man of their very first album that they released in 1967, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. The breakthrough album. I personally I like this album. I more appreciate it. Honestly, guys, out of all the albums we're talking about tonight, this is the one that I struggled with on whether or not do I just think it's fine or am I just saying it's good for appreciation, because the psychedelic era of Pink Floyd is not necessarily my go-to, even though that there's a lot noteworthy there's a lot of noteworthy efforts that Syd Barrett is doing, especially with the guitar. There's a lot of cool sounds that he's doing, a lot of uniqueness. It's very admirable, I'll say. That's a really good word to say. It's there's some stuff that might age kind of not so good, where it just sounds kind of noisy, but then there's some other kind of nice melodies in here that kind of sounds really good. But it's not really my go-to, and I'm struggling whether or not to give this a B or a C. Oh yeah, if everyone's listening, we're grading it just A, B, C, D, F. Just the simple grade school grading.
But what about S, the letter that comes after A?
The superior.
Do you watch tier list videos?
I don't care. I'm going simple here.
You can't spell simple without the letter S.
Uh,
But yeah, no, I hear you, Cody. I remember when I was first listening to this album, I found it remarkably shapeless throughout most of the tracks. I think that's the word I kind of would describe it. There are some standouts, though. I mean, Astronomy Domine,
Yes, Astronomy Domine is a really good sort of it gives you an idea of
Dominate.
what to expect from Floyd because they already have a bit of that tightness in there. That sort
Yeah.
of descending scale when the break comes in, that's when the acid kicks in. Because, like, in case
Yeah.
you
Yes, it
weren't
kicks
aware
in.
this came out in the late 60s, the production sounds a lot like the late 60s, a lot of psychedelic influence, a lot of that spaciness in there. Perhaps none more so than perhaps more, nowhere else will you find an example of early Floyd's spaciness than on one of their best era tracks, Interstellar Overdrive.
Yes.
Yeah, I it's funny when you guys were listening to this album, I was thinking, "Oh, Lyle's gonna love Interstellar Overdrive." It just
I
there's
do.
there's a very
Just gets
raw
building.
garage band kind of sound to it that I was like, "Oh, he's definitely gonna dig that one."
It kind of overstays its welcome a little bit, but yes, I do like this is my favorite song on the album. And I was introduced to it by none other than Doctor Strange, so there's that.
Ah,
There's that one
yes.
too.
He'll come up again on the next one. I also almost forgot. So about a minute 36 into Astronomy Dominated, actually that part is sampled by Death Grips on their song I Want It, I Need It, Death Heated. So for all the Death Grips fans out there, Pink Floyd was noited from the beginning.
I
It's
really
also-
like Bike.
Which one? Which one?
I-
Sorry.
I really like Bike for all the wrong reasons.
Like it's just kind of like oddly
it's the
hilarious.
silliest song.
It's
I
hilarious.
got a mouse and he doesn't have a house, and for some reason I call him Gerald. He's getting rather old, but he is a mouse.
It's very odd and experimental.
It's-
And speaking of that, it's funny how this album was actually recorded at Abbey Road Studio. And during the time of this recording,
Yes.
during the time they were recording this album, guess what other band was in the studio right next door recording sort of a, how would I say it?
Their breakup album.
A masterpiece.
It was sort of a Pepper Heart in a Lonely Hearts Club.
Oh no, I have the wrong one.
Sandwich?
Something about a band with a plan, and
Four lovely fellows.
yes.
Hmm. And that's what I mean.
The
Like when I
Beatles.
listen to Sergeant Pepper's, or sorry, when I listen to the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, all I'm hearing is a
Yes.
product of its time. I'm just like, this sounds like the Beatles. It sounds
they're-
like the Stones. It
They're
sounds
influenced
like,
by
you
those
know,
bands, but there's some bits of they're trying to have their own sound and not be absorbed by their influences. It's not quite there yet. And on that note, Lucifer Sam is boring.
Yeah.
As much as I
there are
like
a
the
few
bowed
songs.
bass on there, it's literally just Sid wrote it about one of his cats. It sounds like it could be a rejected James Bond theme, which would have been very interesting hearing Doctor No or Octopussy with that song in front of it.
Chapter 24 has its moments, but that's what I mean. There's not really a standout. And when I thought that there was supposed to be a standout, I was so shocked to realize that Arnold Lane and See Emily Plays isn't on this fucking album.
Nope.
Can you imagine if it was?
Yeah,
I would
Arnold
bump
Lane
it
and
up
See
a
Emily,
grade.
if you get rid of the Scarecrow and the Gnome or Chapter 24, replace them with Arnold Lane and See Emily Play, this easily gets up to at least a light B, because I have it at a strong
Absolutely.
C.
Yes. Yeah, I have it as.
It's fine.
You know what? Then I'm
There's some
jumping on the
moments.
bandwagon. Then I'm jumping on the bandwagon as well and saying that this one gets a C for me as well.
It's
I
a
feel
high
bad.
C, but
Mhm.
it's a good starting point. But again, it still sounds like late '60s Beatles, and you know that's not exactly where their lane is. Although Sid's lane is mostly doing a lot of LSD and acid, and that's gonna
Yeah.
take its toll in a year or two.
Yeah,
I agree. I will say it belongs in C category. It's commendable, but it's too unfocused for me.
yeah.
But it has some highlights, if
It
nothing
has
else.
it has highlights. It definitely is something you can say. Yeah, like I said, you're giving credit to where credit is due for experimental reasons, but it's just not something that quite clicks with me personally. And yeah, unfortunately, with Sid Barrett, he became way too reliant on LSD. He wasn't just doing it for experimental reasons for the music. He became addicted to it, and that's kind of leads us into this next album. But they also had to bring in some new blood at the same time. So we entered guitar player
Ladies
David
and
Gilmour.
gentlemen, please welcome David Gilmour.
You got David Gilmour on board now as a little bit of backup, and this next album, A Saucerful of Secrets, is the only album that features all 5 band members.
Yeah.
Very
What a time.
momentarily.
What a time to be alive. Oh, wait.
Oh, dark.
So speaking of Doctor Strange from the previous record, oh hi Doctor, he's on the cover.
Yeah, no
Wait,
kidding.
what?
Again, the MCU has been super entrenched since the late 60s, but what a great way to start off this sort of new era of the band. Let There Be More Light is excellent.
Yeah, I love that one too. That's a good opener. And I actually think, maybe Lyle, you'll agree with me, but do you think Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun is where Roger Waters officially found his shtick, his sound?
I don't remember that song, but sure.
It's the one where
Um,
he repeats over and over again, the heart of the sun, the heart of the sun, the heart of the sun. There's literally a performance back then where he repeats that for 10 fucking minutes. And they got away with it because the entire audience was probably stoned off their fucking minds. Just a loud droning like studio, and then all of a sudden you're just hearing him go, the heart of the sun, the heart of the sun, over
Pink
and
Floyd.
over again. Oh my
Roger
God.
Waters, ASMR, everybody.
I
Cool.
believe that he did find his tune with this, because actually somebody just pointed this out recently. I was looking at research on it, and Roger Waters kind of has the same sort of song, like kind of music construction that he has with this song that he would use later on with Another Brick in the Wall, where he has a drone on the piano and he has a 3-note melody. So Set Controls for the Heart of the Sun goes like do 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 do, and then he carries that all the way over to Another Brick in the Wall, where it's the same thing, a 3-note melody with a drone of do 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 do.
So it's kind of like a precursor then.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I have Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun as the first sort of true Floyd epic, and it's not incredibly long, but the scope and the aspects of ambient that they bring in with those seagull samples and everything, it makes for a pretty beautiful result. And the fact that this is really only their second go around, they've already found a good chunk of their sound. Corporal Clegg is kind of hilarious,
Yeah.
I
but
forget the lyrics on that one.
well, it's got a lyrical theme that I'm just gonna put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it in a bit because you're gonna see a lot of that.
I remember enjoying Remember a Day. That was a nice little light
Yep.
psychedelic pop song.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna come back to Remember a Day when it's featured on a compilation album that I'll come back to a little bit later.
I think
Yeah.
that's why it sticks with me more than other songs here, but that's Saucerful of Secrets. I remember I was listening to this lengthy track, and there was always like an interesting thing that would come into the ether every so often. I was listening to this album while taking a walk, and I just remember there was this really really memorable drum track that came in. It was
Yeah.
very syncopated. I don't remember how it went, but it was very interesting to me.
And also the very last track,
Jug Band Blues.
Jug Band Blues. This is the very last Syd Barrett song in Pink Floyd. If you listen to the entire album of Wish You Were Here and then jump to that song, ooh, does it hit. Because it almost feels like Syd is responding to that album in a very fascinating way.
For everything he was going through at that time, for the lyrics to be that self-conscious and that sort of honest about, where he felt he was at that point in time, it's very poignant and very
Absolutely.
fitting.
Absolutely. It's almost like too coincidental too, because like it's like his last track ever. Oh, it hits. You know,
And
it's
then
funny.
it's a shame Seesaw comes right before that.
Yeah, Seesaw is kind of a skippable track, definitely. How I'd rate it? You know what? I would give it a C, yet I do prefer it over The Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
I have it at a light B. I think the good moments put it just above Piper. They are still finding their sound, but there was more on here I enjoyed. It still they still have a ways to go, but I think it's a good point of discovery after you get into more of their significant works.
Yeah.
I don't really have strong opinions on this album. I faintly remember listening to it over a month ago. But I do remember liking it more than Piper at the Gates. So whether you guys want to put it in C or B, I'm not really all that choosy.
I think I might retract. I think I'll give it a B.
It's like a
Okay.
very light B, only because like the title track I really enjoy. I mean, with Pink Floyd as a whole, when they do their long side length epics, I've really been able to like appreciate having the attention span to actually get through it all because some of them get pretty damn long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's reasonable by their standards.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's why the
12
self-title track
minutes.
of that's why the self-titled track of A Saucerful of Secrets doesn't quite click with me because it is a bit meandering at points. But
Hmm.
there are some very good tracks on this one. I'd actually prefer, I'd prefer this over Piper any day.
I mean, look,
Okay,
Corporal
so
Clegg's got the kazoo breaks. You can't go wrong with kazoo.
Oh yeah, that was the fucking kazoo song.
It reminded me of a Recess episode.
Fuck, that was stuck in my head
yeah.
for like a week
Uh,
after.
wow.
And then yeah, after Sid Barrett, I guess got sacked, is it lack of a better word. The band decided to record an album for a film. What was the film called again?
I don't know. I think we might want some more.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I forgot that's what the film was called. Yes, yeah, no, sorry. I get this album mixed up a lot with the other soundtrack album that we'll talk about a little bit later. But these two films are so hard to track down that I've officially just given up wanting to watch them just to hear the songs. Yeah, because we
They
got
don't inter-
more.
they don't interest me very much, but the albums themselves are not bad.
I gotta
Yeah.
agree with Lyle on this because I did try and watch a bit of more. Barbara Schroeder seems like his films are certainly interesting, but they are definitely like made for audiences like counterculture stuff in the late 60s and early 70s. More especially, it's like, okay, the sex and drugs is in the movie, so ergo the rock and roll is in the soundtrack. Hmm. It wasn't for me, the
Uh,
film. Soundtrack's
yeah,
okay.
that seems like a clash, really. I don't know. And there's even tracks in this album that like I'm reminded right away. Oh, this is clearly a soundtrack for a movie. Like they literally have a track called Main Theme.
Well, that's the thing. This is a
Yeah,
story of
and
two
party
halves.
sequence.
Yeah, a party sequence where it's like a minute long. However, Cymberline is quite a
Oh,
gem.
Cymbeline is like I have in here. I have my notes. I have it's a very vivid nightmare, but on the record, there's actually a different vocal take compared to what they use in the movie. David Gilmour sings on the actual soundtrack, but it's Roger Waters that sings it in the film.
Yeah. Oh, okay. They swapped it. Interesting. I
Hmm.
remember Lyle was saying that you liked the Nile song. How
Oh,
I
heavy that
love
one
the
was.
Nile song, and I love Ibiza
absolutely.
Bar.
Those are
Those
some of the
songs kick
heaviest.
ass.
That's some of the heaviest Pink Floyd ever gets.
It
Absolutely.
is.
What was the
It
second
kicks
one you said
ass.
you liked?
Ibiza Bar.
The Beast. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I also really like Green as a Color. That's a very nice folk song. I
I,
enjoyed that one.
I honestly prefer the first half of this album more than the second
Exactly.
half.
The
Yeah.
first half is much more enjoyable because it feels less like a soundtrack and more like an extended EP of some mostly solid jams. I also really enjoy the drum groove on Up the Khyber.
Uh huh.
It's very
Yep.
jazz influenced. It's basically a nice drum solo.
Yeah, I mean, there's some highlights here for sure.
It's just kind of middle of the road again. Like
Well,
I would give it a C to be
yeah. Well,
honest.
that's why the second half. That's where all the actual music from the movie comes. Like the whole like main theme. Yeah, I get a lot of Doors influence from it, and they could have easily. I guess the
Yeah.
Doors were too expensive to get at the time. Also, I don't care for a Spanish piece at all. Like whether
Oh
it's a
no, me
joke or not,
neither.
it's a bad
No.
joke.
It
Yeah,
is what it
no.
says it is. You got what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
There are
Um,
there are a couple of tracks that do end up later on a certain compilation album that I've been alluding to, but we will get to that. It's sort of
you're
a
so discreet, Cody.
it's a celebration of that era, damn it. And I always say to people if they want to get into early Pink Floyd, you go to this compilation and that's all you need.
Hmm.
All right.
And also to bring up Doctor Strange yet again, this line's from Cymbeline. You hear the thunder of the train, and suddenly it strikes you that they're moving into range, and Doctor Strange is always changing size.
And it's high time, Cymbeline.
Oh, that's funny because in Spider-Man, No Way Home? Yeah, No Way Home. He's riding a train and making all those like
They
things
know.
appear out of the sky.
Wait, you've
They
seen that
know.
movie? You've seen that movie already? It hasn't come out yet.
It's on the trailer. He's on top of a train. He's like manipulating illusions, and there's
Oh.
like 5 other trains that come out of the sky. I don't know. How am I supposed to break this down to words? What are we ranking this album? Because
I have it. I have it at a light
mixed.
C, so it's
Yeah, I'd
just
say C as well, yeah.
it's pretty
I-
average. If it was more of the first half instead of like two different halves of the same whole, I'd be fine with it.
I kind of gave it a light B, but I see what you guys are saying. It does leave you wanting more.
Cue the rim
One
shot.
less than that, thank you.
Jump on
Okay.
jump on the drum kit, Josh. Do that rim shot, please.
I'll leave the puns to Josh. It's okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, now as this band posted, I guess David Gilmour's sort of the newbie in the band. They're all trying to figure themselves out a bit. So you get lots of experimentation, let's just say, and oh my god, or Ummagumma, holy fuck, is this next album just a fucking? I've never heard something so noisy and meandering before in my life. This
So,
is just
I would like to just
bad.
clarify for anyone listening. Ummagumma is basically much like how more is two halves of the same whole. This is taken to its nth degree. The first half is actually a pretty good live record of some stuff from earlier in, I believe, 1969-ish. Let me
Yep.
just double check here. Yeah, so it's like two tracks from one track from Piper at the Gates of Dawn, two from A Saucerful of Secrets, and one of their best B-sides that I really wish would have been in their early era catalog. Careful with that axe, Eugene.
Yes, that's an
Yeah.
iconic song.
Yeah, careful with that axe, Eugene. The bass line in that is actually reused in Outside the Wall. Or no,
Yeah.
not Outside the Wall. Sorry,
Not
Goodbye
that one.
Cruel World. It's Goodbye Cruel World.
Okay.
So while the live stuff is good, that's already stuff people have heard by this point. So I personally am so only looking at the second half, which is the studio stuff. Oh boy, is this overly long and unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Jesus.
mess.
So
I'd say The Narrow Way is probably the only listenable track,
Which
but
is
that's
ironic,
really not saying
'cause
much.
David Gilmour said he basically bullshitted his way through the entire thing. I'm like, I don't blame him at all. But like,
Oh no.
even Nick Mason on the Grand Vizier's Garden Party, he's trying, but like when the whole thing is each member makes their own solo piece without any collaboration with anybody else, you're gonna get a lot of clashing ideas and you're gonna get stuff that just doesn't work, and it's like forcing the round peg into the square hole. It's just not happening.
Yeah, no, I agree with you,
Yeah.
Josh. I agree with you, Josh. If it honestly wasn't for the live tracks, it would get an F. So the live tracks really do save it to give it a D. I'm just judging it just as a whole, as an
Now,
experience.
here's
And
the thing. I like
this is-
Grantchester
this-
Meadows as an example, but it doesn't need to be 7+ minutes. Just because you have a side of a record to do stuff.
Yeah, that's the only song I liked was Grantchester Meadows.
I love the Next Waters one. Several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pick.
Yeah.
And
Well, you don't
all
like
emo
hearing
bands
noise?
in the early mid 2000s had long song titles.
Oh
Yeah.
man, no.
Oh.
I'd say let's just move. I think the band is also kind of begrudgingly hates this album too. They went on the
Yeah,
record to say like
I remember Nick Mason saying the one good thing about it is that we didn't do it again.
I actually remember one
Understatement
time.
of the decade.
I actually remember one time Richard Wright was saying around this era that they were trying to do an album where they were using no instruments. So like they were literally spending days to try to pluck a rubber band to make it sound like a bass. And after like 5 days in, Richard Wright just snapped and went to Roger Waters and said, "What the fuck are we doing? This is nonsense."
There's that part in, I think, part 2 or 3 of Sisyphus, the opening track, where it's like, it sounds like it's the piano's really soothing, but then all of a sudden it just like jars you awake with the minor chords. I'm like, what was that for? And like,
It does
okay,
feel
back
like
to
an
the
album.
synths.
It does feel like an album that's trying way too hard to be different, and I think that's probably like when it's like when you're stuck in a room and when you have writer's block and you're trying to make songs and you're like, oh, if I tap my instrument, it makes a funny sound. Let's just record 10 hours of that and call it a
Well,
day.
like even on small furry animals, the use of the high pitched the voices being higher pitched to like reflect I think different animals, like that is basically Alvin and the Chipmunks. And I'm like Alvin and the Chipmunks and Pink Floyd. If we thought Chipmunk Punk was bizarre, I'm sure this would be even more bizarre.
Yeah, two things that aren't too mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it just shows off the worst tendencies of art rock, I'm afraid.
No,
And yeah, I would gladly give this a D.
Yeah,
this is
definitely D. Like
this
maybe
this is
Grantchester Meadows in the narrow way, but like just because you have a side to work with doesn't mean you should follow through. It's Goldblum's theory of logic. You spend so much time thinking about whether you could do it, you didn't spend enough time thinking about whether you should do it.
Well, at least the next one's a lot more pleasant to the ear.
Ah, yes. Now we enter into the 1970s. We're out of the
Ah,
60s.
the good period.
But before we do that, I'd like to give a nice honorable mentioning to Relics.
Yes.
1971.
Yeah, I know I'm jumping ahead just by 1 year, but this encapsulates the entire era of encapsulates. Sorry. I've had a drink tonight. Blame it on the brown cow.
Oh, now, bro.
Hey, speaking of cows.
Hey,
we'll get
why
to that
don't
in
you
a second.
continue with why you want
How about
us
you
to cover
stick to
this?
something?
sorry. I'm jumping.
What are you, Ummagumma?
No. Relics to me, it has two of their best singles that weren't worked into an album. You got Arnold Lane. You got See Emily Plays.
See Emily
Yes.
Play will be worked into future songs. There'll be nods to it, but again, I agree. Like we said before, if Arnold Lane and See Emily Play are on the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, that album goes up a few notches in our books.
It's even an album that's even worth being on. They felt like it was so worth it. They put it on the famous Bums album poster with the ladies and the artwork on their back.
Yeah.
It's noteworthy,
nice of
damn
them.
it. It's noteworthy.
And of course, we also have Careful with That Axe, Eugene, which, again, only makes me wonder, why was that not on a Saucerful of Secrets?
I agree.
I
Yeah,
didn't.
it's funny. It's funny. You got Circus Minor and the Nile song back
Circus
to back
Minor,
the
yeah.
same way.
I mean, I don't blame them. They kind of want people to forget about More as well. It's not that great.
The song "Binding My Time," I don't think that was on a previous album.
No,
I
it was
don't
on. It was
think.
previously unreleased. I thought it was okay, but I found a lot of the B sides for stuff like Paintbox and Julia Dream and things like
Yeah.
that. There's a lot more of a blues influence and jazz on here, which I didn't mind, but I also can see why they sort of kept it to a compilation because it doesn't sound much like early Pink Floyd at all, which I
Yeah.
appreciate, but I'm sure other fans may disagree on that. Or in
But my
Paintbox, yes.
But some of my favorite tracks by Syd Barrett are in here, so I would honestly say, yeah, this is my favorite sort of little capsule of that era.
Yeah,
The compilation album is better than their earlier albums.
some of
It
them.
sums it all up.
I don't
It sums it all up. It
officially
takes
rank
it takes. Oh no, I'm not going to officially rank it either. But it just takes bits of like the first like 3 or 4, or I guess 3 albums, and just kind of like puts it all together to this nice sort of. I don't know. I like it a lot. It's not a go-to of mine. If I would rate it, maybe a B. But
Yeah, I would
won't
give
make
it a light
official.
B.
Yeah.
Yeah, B.
All right. Yeah. So I said before, we got some cows here. We're gonna have
Aw,
some more.
guys, come on, don't have a cow.
Going
Yeah.
down to Cowtown to see
Cows
what
are
we
friends
can
to
see.
me. Lives beneath the ocean, that's
No.
where I will be beneath the way. Oh,
Wait.
we're not doing the They Might Be Giants episode, but someday.
There you go, Josh.
So
You got Adam Hartmother in 1970.
so we've
The
reached the
first
beginning
good-
of the great
the fir-
period.
It's the precursor of what's about to come because, yes, this is a very nicely structured album. I actually have this album on vinyl.
Yeah, me
And
too.
you too can
It's
have
glorious.
a cow staring you in the face for all eternity.
Yeah,
It's
mooning
pretty
us.
surreal. Yeah,
No, it's
the
in its
title
natural
track,
habitat.
the title track, Adam Hartmother. I
I
learned this
love
recently,
that suite.
and I can't believe that I
So
didn't bring this
glorious.
up during one of my previous pop talks, but like Stanley Kubrick asked the band, "Can I use that track for A Clockwork Orange?" And that's kind of amazing. And I know, like, I agree with you now, Lyle. Like, it doesn't fit well in the movie. I can't even think of where it hasn't been on record on where he said he wanted to place that particular track within the film. But some people have, like, shown, like, that opening shot of Clockwork Orange and I guess spliced it together with that track, and it works kind of interesting well, but I don't know.
It's not as good as Wendy Carlos's work.
Yeah, but I do agree with what Roger Waters said, is that this feels like a track for a movie that was never ever made.
It's very epic.
I love the
so
use of
epic.
brass in this suite because and in the opening part, Father Shout, it adds that extra bit of symphonic influence, and then there's a bit of like horses in the background, and then segueing through to like Breast Milky with the slide guitar and the choir.
Yeah, because the first
these names are ridiculous.
Yeah, Mother 4, Funky Dung, Mind Your
Funky
Throats,
Dungy.
Please, Remergence.
Like you do.
Well, Funky Dung, ironically, is actually some pretty funky stuff. And then it's got a gritty guitar solo from David Gilmour.
Mm-hmm.
I just find the orchestra really memorable in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just so much range.
great
to it.
passage.
That's the whole first side of the album. Then you flip it over, and it's so nicely balanced too. Where you got a song from Waters, you got a song from Richard Wright, who doesn't really do it that much, and then you got and then you got a song by David Gilmour. It's perfectly balanced.
Well, I actually
should
enjoy If a lot because it's basically sort of Roger.
If I were swan, I'd be gone. It's nice. It's very soothing.
I feel it's partially about Roger reflecting on the way Sid left the band, and there is also sort of themes of, growing apart from friends, like, and if I were a good man, I'd talk with you more often than I do, or if I were a good man, I'd understand the spaces between friends. And while it's structured pretty much the same for all 5 verses, it's still a pretty great acoustic ballad, and I'm a little surprised it wasn't a bigger single at the time, because I feel like especially for 1970, this could have done pretty well. For like singer-songwritery.
I think Fat Old Son was really the only track that stood out to people at the time.
And for good reason. Remember those church bells, by the way. That will be coming up later.
Yes, I'm so happy you mentioned that, Josh.
Well,
yes,
you mentioned it first, but yes, thank you.
It's going to come back, and there's closure. There's definitely closure with those bells. Yeah, no, Fat Old Son, like I said before about Set Controls for the Heart of the Sun, was Roger Waters finding his shtick. This is where David Gilmour came into his own in his own guitar playing, like found his sort of ether, I would say, within the band and how he wants to play and sing at the same time.
Yeah, I don't care for Summer 68. I mean, Richard Wright, I think, from a vocals perspective, does pretty well, but it sounds like the whole gimmick is, he had a one-night stand with someone, and, she obviously has feelings for him, he doesn't, so he just kind of not switches. But Fat Old Son, my hot take is that Fat Old Son walked so comfortably Numb could run.
Heyo. All right.
And now we're going to end it off with what I like to call Alan's ASMR Adventures. Or
Holy
Alan's
fuck.
Psychedelic Breakfast.
What?
I like this track.
I like it.
I like it too. It's just so amusing. I've. Oh God, no.
Oh, pass the mustard. Oh.
Marmalade. He likes marmalade.
Sorry, pass
God.
the marmalade.
The
Marmalade,
way
I
the
like
water,
marmalade.
the sink dripping keeps time, and then you have the organ turning into a tea kettle, and the cereal.
My flakes. Oh, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, sausage.
Oh my God.
Coffee, marmalade. I like marmalade. And then he just settles with fucking flakes, and he doesn't know how to chew with his
I
fucking
thought it
mouth
sounded like
closed.
Rice Krispies because I heard like the snap crackle popping, but oh man, when Pink Floyd is on, they're on, and this is a 12 and a half minute, 13 minutes, excuse me, 13 minutes of just hilarity, but also it's really an interesting bit of like ambient / plunderphonics type. Like they're mixing all these sounds together. It's literally just the roadie, and he's just doing stuff.
Yeah,
and then
yeah, that's right. He's a roadie. Alan, what's his last name?
Alan Styles.
Alan Styles.
Styles.
And
Yeah.
then he basically just like turns the sink off, and though he closes the door, goes to get in his car, drives away, but then you hear that water still dripping in the sink. And I believe in the original vinyl, the sound was actually locked into the groove, so the water would just keep on dripping forever until you actually turn the record player off.
Okay, then I gotta test this out because I have it.
I could
Holy
be
shit.
wrong about that, but I believe that that was intentional.
I
But
will confirm that later
yes,
on.
on some copies, the dripping is actually cut into the runoff groove, so it will play on forever until you remove the stylus from the album. But on the CD, it only continues for about 17 seconds after everything else is stopped. But I say Adam Hard Mother is the first superb Pink Floyd record where I have no
Yes,
problems giving this a decent A. This is excellent.
Really? Okay. I mean,
I agree. I give it
yeah.
an A as well.
You know
The
what?
production is so much tighter.
Okay, so be it. Well, it gets a definitive A. I was leaning more towards B. It's definitely, as of right now, my favorite one. It's their best one at this point.
Well, part of it is that's what happens when a record is only 5 tracks long, of which the first is a side long, and the closing track is almost another side. So the way
Yeah.
the sequencing comes into play, especially in the 70s era, a lot of it will be determined by that. Because this record and some of their other ones in their golden era are sequenced incredibly well, and that's a big part of it. It doesn't feel its length, because trust me, there are some later era ones that you're gonna feel how long they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you would have
This
asked
one
me,
was
if you would have asked me like 5, 6 years ago what I thought of Adam Hart Brother, I would say it sucks. I hate it. I've definitely grown to like it a lot
Hashtag the
throughout
cow
the
did
time.
nothing wrong.
Oh, don't worry.
I gotta.
There's gonna be more farm animals coming
Well,
soon.
now the next album they did is actually one that you are pretty into, but I think I got the hype once actually listened to it, and that is Meddle.
Yes, here we go,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen. I introduce you to Pink Floyd.
Your
'Cause-
genius is showing.
Where? No, Metal is excellent. Lyle and I have been joking about this now, and it's probably going to be a thing you tease me about. But like, I thought how it kicks off with One of These Days was a wicked,
Yes.
solid, awesome bass line.
Yes,
when
the
it all
bass
just goes,
battle.
You thought
It-
it was. You
it's
thought
just
it was
one.
so
It's,
complicated.
it's just one note echoed.
It's one note. The sequencing and recording is very complex, but the song itself is not that hard to play
Well,
on bass.
here's a
It's
little
literally just one note.
interesting tidbit. David Gilmour's bass apparently had those strings because a roadie was supposed to actually get new strings for it, but they never did. But I think it works out.
David Gilmour or Roger Waters?
No, David Gilmour.
David Gilmour.
Yeah, because he and Roger
Oh,
Waters did the alternating bass lines, and I
okay.
have there's that line, cut them into little pieces, and I thought, is this their last resort?
One of these days, I will cut you into little pieces. Boom, 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 boom,
I
boom,
feel like that
boom.
was I think part of this was that it was a like it was like a diss track towards a certain DJ or something. Which, given some of the lyrical
Mm.
content of later on in the record, it's interesting. But it's a really great way to start this one off. And
I think it's actually Nick Mason whose voice that is.
yes, it
but they
is.
just yeah, that's cool. He's never sang before, or his voice is never heard in almost any
Yeah,
song by
because
Floyd.
there was that like blowing sound segueing into a pillow of winds. I thought it was like some really insane blizzard, but it was just supposed to be like a light wind.
Oh, Pillow of Winds. It's definitely it soothes you after how hard One of These Days hits you right away.
Yeah,
And then you get Fearless.
oh,
Oh,
Fearless.
shout out to my uncle. It's one of his favorite songs of all time. Fearless has an excellent guitar.
Which apparently
riff
this
to it.
song is about a
Oh.
legendary BBC DJ John Peel, which would make sense if One of These Days is about dissing someone else.
Josh, you were saying that this song kind of went on a little too long in your opinion?
A little bit, because I don't think it needs to be more than 6 minutes, but I think it was more because the end of the track is a bunch of football fans of a football club singing You'll Never Walk Alone, which is a pretty known song. It's a Rodgers and Hammerstein standard, so I'm sure people that are into musical theater will
Yeah.
know about that. But you go from a song like A Pillow of Winds, which is actually named after a scoring combo in Mahjong, which is kind of a neat tidbit. It's a good song, but I still do feel it's a little bit more of an homage to the Beatles, which at this point, this is their sixth album, and the Beatles, had just broken up at this point, or were just about to. I
Yeah.
think they could have more of their own sound, but that actually it makes something like a track like San Tropez actually really nice. It's more of a bouncy, almost like a lounge jazz kind of a influence on
Yeah.
here.
I picture it like a beach. You're just relaxing on vacation. It's really nice.
Then of course
And
there's
then
that line, "I'll walk you ho ho home," or if you're alone, I'll come ho ho home. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought Santa wasn't real. Are you telling me Roger Waters was Santa this whole time?
Yes.
And also, and I pause for a while by a country style and listen to the things they say. So that's where the donut place got their name from. I don't know if that's true, but it
Interesting.
would be funny if it was.
That
All
is
right.
interesting.
But it's apparently a commune in the south of France that the place is named after.
I think we've stalled enough. I
Yes, the
hear some.
reason why
Yeah,
most people should listen to metal echoes.
let's flip it. Yeah.
Fucking echoes.
Oh
Oh my
my
god.
God.
This is them like coming into their own.
This is
I'm
their
not kidding.
first
Yeah.
proper
You can
epic from
you
the
can
prog
hear
era.
it. You can literally hear it. Like echoes is probably it might quite possibly be like one of my favorite songs of all time. Like now do you guys know where my love for long songs come from? Like
Yes.
There's that pinging at the beginning, and it sounded so much like it was some sort of sonar or radar thing going off, and I'm like, is
yeah.
this where Hans Zimmer got into doing scores from? Because it sounds a lot like the stuff he would do for Christopher Nolan's films.
Perhaps he does
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
use like syncopated percussion, like things like ticking clocks and all that.
Yes,
Just
I too saw Dunkirk.
Yes.
just the sound of David Gilmour and Richard Wright singing in harmony. It always
Oh,
sounds
yes.
nice. Yeah.
That's actually one thing that, especially in a few albums, Pink Floyd actually do have some really stellar harmonizing sections.
Like listening to the first 7 minutes and then right at that 7 minute mark where the beat just completely changes to just like boom, 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 boom. It's one of my favorite. I just love it. Gives me goosebumps every time. I just love listening to it. I close my eyes. I just completely drift away. And then the song kind of progresses a little bit when you get to like in like the 12 minute mark and then it starts to get kind of noisy again and I'm like, oh my god, Ummagumma flashbacks, oh no.
Oh,
And
yes,
then all of a sudden
yes,
and
that
then all of a
part.
sudden like and then like 14 and a half minutes in this beautiful ambient starts to like build itself way back up and then it just sounds like this band is like literally just like we got something here, we are transcending into something really special, and then it just comes back into its own, back to the previous verse.
I was
Oh,
gonna say that one part,
epic.
the one part where you said it was like Ummagumma again. I was like, it's like small furry animals but good. And if the forest was in hell, but oh man, they and anyone that wants to listen to another and really immersive version of Echoes, look up the Live at Pompeii version of it.
Yes, yes. Well, they're all shirtless in that beaming heat, just jamming out. Oh, I love it. So good.
I
Is this your
gotta
favorite
say,
track too, Lyle? Or
Yeah, this is the one I'll always go back to. I do like how the riff later inspired the Phantom of the Opera musical.
yes, yep.
Like da 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 da, and then the Phantom of the Opera is like beep, 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 beep,
Oh yeah,
beep,
that
beep, beep,
four
beep,
note
beep.
descending riff is great. I love
Yeah.
that part.
Yeah, that brings me
See,
chills.
this would be a little higher if not for Seamus. It's a little throwaway number. It's fun. It's a little jokey. I respect it. But Meddle is the first true instance of the Pink Floyd most people know actually coming into being. Because while Adam Hardmother had a lot of experimentation going for it, Meddle has something better, and that's unification.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
This is definitely a great stepping stone to get people into the sort of proggier era that Floyd has become. Seamus is okay. You'll Never Walk Alone is okay, but I'm giving this an A for sure. It's a light A, but I have no problems with that.
I love this album. I own this is the other album that I own. I own three Pink Floyd albums on vinyl. This is the second. I'll get to the third eventually. Yeah, this is I got that. I'm so happy that Echoes is just the B-side. It's so great.
And that's what the sequencing does. I mean, the A side has some really good moments on there, but Echoes is a fantastic way to close something like this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the
Yeah,
fact that I only just learned while listening to it that the cover is just a close up of an ear underwater is kind of hilarious.
that blew my mind when you just told me that recently. Oh my god. Now it all makes sense.
Well, now we're going from underwater to up in the sky with their last soundtrack proper, although they did do some contributions to this film, Zabriskie Point, but their final proper soundtrack, Obscured by Clouds.
The most
Hmm.
underrated Pink Floyd album of all time, because
I agree in most ways.
this grew on me. I mean, the very first track, the self-titled track, and then the very last track, I don't know how to feel about those necessarily, but everything in between are some pretty solid sitters. I mean, you got sorry, solid hitters, not solid sitters. I mean, the burning bridges kind of come, the melody kind of comes back in Mudman a little bit. Like there's
I like that one.
Yeah,
a little
Burning
bit of
Bridges
a
is good.
That,
yeah,
that
like a
one
bit of
kicks
a
ass.
bit of a reprise to it. But it's funny when I forget who it was that sent it in the chat. When somebody sent to me Children's End, I knew about that song, but
I
then
think
for
that was
some
me.
reason that was you. Okay, so
Childhood's End.
ever since you've sent that, I've heard it every single day. Childhood's End is incredible, and it's actually grown to be my favorite song on this album. It actually used to be Stay, which is Richard Wright's song.
But Stay to Me is again like Summer '68. It's basically about Richard Wright fucks. Like we need to know. Like it's okay, but I mean, if it, I would think it has more to do with the characters in the film La Vallée sort of falling out of love with each other in the context of the film, which
Yeah.
I did see some of La Vallée. I like it a little more than more, but
Okay.
it still kind of feels like the idea of it is this rich woman goes with these people to explore some area somewhere where like this they're trying to find this place that is obscured by clouds, hence the title. It's like some valley or something that's I don't exactly remember where it takes place, but there's sex involved. There's like cultural things involved with the indigenous tribe, the indigenous group in whatever area it is. But it does get kind of graphic because there's like something where they kill a pig.
Oh shit.
But this album is a much better Pink Floyd album as opposed to just a collection of songs to underscore the movie. I
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
kind
That.
of liked What's the Deal.
Me too. Me too. That's a good one. Yeah.
I like the title alone.
Well,
What's the deal?
well, it's about
What's the deal?
I think it's more about trying to find more meaning in your life as you get older and the more perspective that you gain and there's a line like turn to speak but you're alone, million miles from home, you're on your own.
Hmm.
I think I just like this album on the production side of things because this is where it really starts to sound like Pink Floyd. Like
Yes.
when you look
Yeah.
at the album after this one and then more of their stuff until they hit the 80s, like this is how I feel Pink Floyd usually sounds at this point.
Yeah.
And they finally hit that mark.
Because if you compare everything that they were doing in this album as opposed to more previously, it's like I'm not reminded that this is made to be an album for a movie. Like I'm not thinking that it's a soundtrack. It actually feels like a fluent, nice album with track after track.
And in case
Right.
you're keeping track, Free 4, again, there's a verse where Roger Waters brings up his father's death in World War II. Remember that?
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, I wonder if we'll come back to that
Oh,
once
we
or
will.
twice. No,
A
yeah,
couple
no.
times.
Free Four is actually it has like one of those lyrics. Uh, the memories of a man in his old age are the deeds of a man in his prime. Oh,
Yes.
I like that. That hits.
Yes, that is a
Yes.
huge. And
That's
even in
that's
Childhood's End, that whole I mean, I kind of find that the theme of that song is a little too real, given most people have gone through the last 18 months sort of, not really having much in that, like growing more disconnected with people.
I didn't really listen to the lyrics of Childhood's End that much, but it's just the jam of it, the vibe of that song that I love.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
for sure.
oh, it's so good. Yeah, no, my
So,
underrated. Absolutely, I would give this. I don't know if I give this an A or a B to be honest.
I think I'm good with giving. I gave it a strong B because I like it's overall quite good. I
Mhm.
do think that there are some parts that hold it back from being truly great in places.
yeah, I agree.
I'll
I
give it
gave
a
it a B as well.
All right, I'll give it a B too. Yeah, yeah. Again, like it kind of begins and ends a bit questionable. Like I don't know how to feel about that first and last track a bit. It feels a bit out of place.
Well, is
All right.
everybody
But
strapped in? I think we're about ready. Let's get the ignition going here, and we're ready to blast off to one of the most important records of all time. There's no other way to say it.
I hear some heartbeats. I hear some clocks ticking.
it's
hearing-
time.
Can you
I'm
taste
hearing-
colors and see sound?
I'm hearing voices.
Do you have money?
I'm going down a streamline through a
Cody,
prism.
Cody, speak to
and
me.
out.
What do you think? What are you thinking?
Well, guys, I'll see you on the
On
dark
the dark
side
side
of the moon.
moon.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Mark it in your
1970
calendars.
1973. Oh my God.
The year where Pink Floyd finally arrived.
Yes.
Oh, this is it. Anybody that has had just a passing glance of this prism just knows what that is because it's Pink Floyd. Like this cover is everywhere. It is so iconic. Dark Side of the Moon is just a musical experience. It's absolutely perfect in execution. This was actually around the time where the band they were working together so well. There was no fights, and it shows. Everything is nicely balanced. It's just this combination of like jazz, blues, rock, experimental synth. Well, not really synthwave, but there's just a lot of really. I think the backbone itself is Richard Wright with his keyboard and his piano playing. Like the tracks, "Great Gig in the Sky" and "Us
The
and
Great
Them"
Gig in the Sky is fantastic.
Great Gig
It
in the
is one of their
Sky.
best songs.
Oh, Great Gig in the Sky and Us and Them has some of the best
Can
piano
we
work I've
talk
ever
about
heard
Claire
ever.
Torrey's vocals on The Great Gig in the Sky? She is amazing.
I am not even going to try to sing it because I cannot do her justice.
She did it in one take too, which is phenomenal.
Oh, I
Yes. And the funny thing about that one take is that afterwards she left the studio a little bit embarrassed, and then she kind of came back a few minutes later and said, "Do you guys want to do that again? I feel like I was terrible." And everybody in the room was like, "Claire, that was one of the greatest things we've ever heard. Like, we're not doing a second take."
bet. In
And
fact,
some
so great she had to sue EMI in 2004 to actually get a
Yep.
writing credit on it.
Yep, I was just about to say that. Some drama happened years later where she wanted credit. I mean, she won. Her and Richard definitely deserve credit on this. Oh my God, where do I even begin? What was the it was some instrument that they used for On the Run where they play like 4 notes really slow, but then they speed it up and it creates like that.
I think it was there was an EMS synth that Richard used, and I think they might have like used the production to like play one note at a time and then speed it up to where everything sort of fit.
I mean, it just the lyrics in this album, the content too, just of like the whole themes of this album is so timeless. It just tells everything about just like society and about just like existential crisis and like, you know, it's just, oh my God.
Which is why the heartbeat at the very beginning of Speak to Me loops back around to Eclipse. So like this, when you talk about things being perfectly sequenced, this can essentially be an endless listen, and I love that part. Time is actually, again, very topical because no, doesn't pass you by more when you get older. What about it?
I had a friend back in like grade school, and you know, he was kind of like going through a bit of like, you know, bit of rough shit back then. Like I kind of drifted away from him, but there were 2 songs, actually make that 3 songs that he was playing over and over again. One being Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, Time by Pink Floyd, and Hail Mary by Tupac. He was just playing those 3 songs over and over and over again, and Time stuck with me the most out of those ones because I always get a bit startled the second you start hearing all those alarms going off.
I'm living in a cuckoo clock.
And just the drumming and just the build up towards the verse. And it took me a while to realize that that's actually David Gilmour singing the verse and the chorus is Richard Wright. And holy shit, is it shared so beautifully because they come back to breathe a little bit later on with a reprise at the end of the song. Oh, so beautiful.
That passage of "You are young and life is long and there is time to kill today, and then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun." Like, this is too real.
Hey Lyle, How do you feel about that money bass line?
7-4. Not even once.
It's an institution. Everyone should learn it.
Yes.
Hey, when I sold my
You know
bass,
you love it.
I sold my bass
It's
guitar.
my favorite track.
I sold
it's my favorite track off the album. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, for obvious reasons. I actually
I'm
sold
biased.
I sold my bass guitar a few years ago, and I said the
You
last
did.
track I want to learn is Money. So I can play it. It's in there somewhere in my brain. I can't remember exactly how
Like
it
the
goes.
solo game on Dark Side is somewhere else. You have one of David Gilmour's best solos on Time. You have, of course, the iconic bass line of Money, and then just the fantastic sax solos on Us and Them.
Yes, Us and Them. I mean, it's hard to choose a favorite track off of this album because I look at it almost as one piece. Like I can't listen to one track from this album sometimes. I just have to play it from beginning to end. But I think I would prefer to listen to just Us and Them sometimes. I can kind of get into that song quickly.
Also,
But then it bleeds so nicely into Any Color You Like, and I'm just like, I want to keep it going, and then Roger Waters just completely takes it home with both Brain Damage, Eclipse.
Well, something you're gonna hear from me in
Eclipse.
the later era. Us and Them is basically a Pink Floyd song about how wars are necessary. I wonder if Roger Waters wrote this song at all.
Oh yeah,
But
We're
any
gonna come
color
back to
you
him.
like is actually like I have in my notes basically it's the most fitting track of being on a record with a prism splitting colors into a rainbow. So it's like it's got those
Yeah.
keyboard and guitar solos if you just want to sink into your beanbag chair.
It's funny, yeah. When I listen to the Any Color You Like, I think of that album cover. So and think of visually going through it and riding along with it. Like, it's so hypnotic.
And the closing 1-2 punch of Brain Damage Eclipse. This is where those themes of lunacy, madness, insanity, and everything they went through with Sid Barrett. That's where this all starts to come to a head.
The lunatic is in my head. Ooh, that was a good impression. Wow.
And then just
Pat myself on the back.
to have Eclipse end with that heartbeat to loop it back around, it makes for. I mean, every person that listens to music needs to experience the dark side of the moon at some point when they first get into rock music, because it's a
Absolutely.
classic for so many reasons. And while it's not my favorite Pink Floyd record, it is very, very fucking close. So I've got no problem giving this the highest of high A's.
Anybody giving this any short of an A is not a music fan.
Like, there's almost nothing else to say, but it's Dark Side. Listen to it.
There is no dark side of the moon. As a matter of fact, it's all dark.
I
It's a
reminded,
D.
I reminded of Pepe the King song from
It's
the
a
Muppets.
D.
Okay, for anyone who has Dark Side of the Moon, press play now.
Oh, I mean like D as in for Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, this album's an A.
It's them at their absolute
For sure.
peak at this point. Also, another noteworthy thing is that at this time there was this filmmaker by the name of Alejandro Jodorowsky, and he was trying to make a certain movie I've probably mentioned once or twice before. It's called Dune.
Mm-hmm.
It's
yeah.
it's a Frank Herbert novel that he was trying to make a very ambitious movie in the 1970s. It completely fell apart, but he had a lot of talent involved with it even before like all these other talents started to break off and do their own things, like H.G. Geiger, is that his name?
H.R. Geiger.
H.R. Geiger.
H.R. Geiger, sorry. Like he was supposed to do like the Harkonnen universe, and then he went on to do Alien, and then I think Orson Welles was supposed to play the Baron Harkonnen. And funny enough, Alejandro wanted Pink Floyd to do the entire soundtrack to this movie. And then a mere 30 to 40 years later, Hans Zimmer does a rendition of Eclipse for Denis' new movie Dune for the trailer. It's pretty great.
Cycle continues.
It's a
Yeah.
good thing that Pink Floyd didn't do the original Dune film. I kind of feel like David Lynch and 80s era Pink Floyd would not have worked.
Oh God,
Toto, on the other hand.
learning to fly on those sandworms.
Well, now it's 1975, and Pink Floyd had just put out one of the most critically acclaimed, beloved records of all time, and they knew there was not necessarily going to be a way to follow up that, and yet they somehow did, because "Wish You Were Here" is my favorite Pink Floyd record.
I knew it. I knew this would be your favorite. This is an outstanding album, actually. It's a great follow-up to Dark Side. It's actually, it's kind of nice to be like, well, first of all, this is a tribute to Syd Barrett himself.
You look at the artwork and you just know. I mean, that's iconic in its own. The handshake with the guy who's on fire. But like this, whereas Dark Side of the Moon had allusions to Syd Barrett, A Saucerful of Secrets kind of did. That comes up later on. This is a fantastic musical eulogy to anyone in your life, whether you may have lost contact with them, they are no longer around, they've passed
Mhm.
on, because the entirety of the suite of Shine On You Crazy Diamond is a eulogy in and of itself. It's
Boo,
beautiful.
no, no, no.
Yeah, that four note that I call it Sid's theme. It also reminds me, on an aside, of the riff for the Kula Shaker track Tadva, because like do 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 do. It's do 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 do. They make it five notes, but it's very similar. However,
Yeah.
when everything actually kicks in, it's fantastic. And then when we get to the refrain in part four, that shine on your crazy diamond, like that is one of the most classic music moments you could ever hope to achieve.
Absolutely. What do you think about this album, Lyle?
When I first heard about the concept of this album, I thought Syd Barrett died or something. Like I don't
Oh,
know, but like I thought he died like ages ago, and they were just like, oh, we're commemorating his memory, but he simply left the band due to like mental issues. So
yeah.
I know that kind of when I re-listened to it again, it's like okay, that kind of took a little bit out of it for me, but that's okay. Cause yeah, Shine On Your Crazy Diamond's excellent. Have a Cigar gets stuck in my head a lot.
Oh, the riff on
Wish
Have a Cigar.
Yeah, very nice keyboard work on
Oh,
that
by the
one.
way, which one's pink?
It's debatable.
And there's also the line, and did we tell you the name of the Game Boy? We call it Riding the Gravy Train.
And that's the only Pink Floyd song that it took me years to realize. I thought it was Roger, but it's Roy Harper singing the vocals. And
Hmm.
it's funny. Roger Waters said, like, there's early there. You can type it in on YouTube somewhere. Like, there are early recordings of Roger singing "Have a Cigar." It just wasn't quite there. And then Roy Harper was actually recording in the same studio, and they were kind of like helping each other out. And then he said, "Hey, why don't I just give it a shot?" So he gets in, sings his friggin' heart out, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna use that." But Roger Waters is kind of like he frowned over the track. Years later, he was saying if they would have just gave me one more day to get that range, I think I would have nailed it. So he's kind of biased
Yeah.
towards the song, but I think it works perfectly to have somebody on the outside of the band sing about that, because while it is a very bittersweet tribute to Sid, it's also an album that has like a themes about how the music industry can completely drag you down,
Which they'd
i.e.,
already done
the
before.
machine.
Yes, Welcome to the Machine, which also would inspire a level in the Sega Genesis quote unquote hidden gem, if you want to call it that, Echo the Dolphin.
Because it is true that like what years ago, like a music producer puffed down on a cigar and said, "This band is fantastic. Oh, but by the way, which one's pink?" And they were sort of just like, "Wow, it's kind of funny how like producers just want like answers out of everything.
Uh,
So why don't we just poke fun at that?"
Well, like the whole like coldness of the production on Welcome to the Machine, and the whole idea about the industry lures young artists in, and it's warning of a dystopic future where industry and capitalism rules all. I'm like, again, I wonder who wrote this one. But
I
I
mean,
did. It's
yeah, go
fine.
ahead.
It's fine and all, but I'm like, I'm still thinking there was the outro. I'm like, is this the THX logo? It sounds like that. The audience is now
Oh,
deaf.
the synthesized work in Welcome to the Machine, like it feels like a sharp pain going through my spine. It's just so like, holy fuck, like it's so
Uh,
good.
well, I think perhaps there is no better fitting moment on Wish You Were Here outside of the Shine On You Crazy Diamond Suite than with the title track, because that is a very sincere ballad, and just
Oh,
the chorus itself, even those two lines, truer words are oft never spoken. How I wish you were here.
We're just
Two
two
lost
lost
souls
souls
swimming
swimming
in a fishbowl.
Fishbowl.
Year
Year
after
after
year.
I'll try to sync all that up the best I can.
I mean, even the
Yeah.
scatting in there, it really works with the sincerity and emotion that it conveys. But also that cough, the beginning, apparently that was Richard Wright coughing, and that was hearing that was what later inspired him to quit smoking.
Ah,
Mm.
interesting. Okay.
See, music can help you quit faster than Nicorette. Not sponsored.
And another really kind of sad tidbit about this album is that are you guys aware about the surprise little visit
Yes.
that the band
Which
had
Yes.
while
which
they were
makes
recording
this
this
whole
album?
thing even more like genuine and sincere.
Yeah, like some man just wandered into the studio while they were recording, and they're kind of like, "Who is that guy?" They don't
He had a
recognize him.
shaved head and shaved eyebrows.
Shaved head, shaved eyebrows. He was overweight, and I think it was David who recognized him right away, and he said, "Guys, that's Sid." And it kind of just all brought them to tears. Like they were like, we hadn't seen him in years, and yet he's a completely different looking man. And the fact that they're literally writing an album that is a tribute to him was, oh, I can't even imagine what that was like, to be honest.
Well, and that's why when we get to like part 6 through 9 of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, when we get to the final part 9 is the proper farewell. It's this moody 4/4 funeral march. You have the key. It's like sort of the credits song that everyone should hope to have when their time comes. And as a
Yeah.
final note to end this perfect record on, the melody for See Emily Play in the last bit. It brings everything full circle.
Yes, absolutely. And it took me years to notice that too. Ah, it's so bittersweet. It's funny. People always say it's either Dark Side or The Wall of being like the most iconic Floyd album, but then Wish You Were Here just pops in out of nowhere and is like, no, 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 no. I'm
Wild
the best.
card, bitches! Oh my god. This is my favorite. This is highest of A's. Hands down.
Yeah, I give it an A too. Wish You Were Here is a really good song to play at a funeral too when you lose someone. That's okay.
We gotta go from emotional farewells to Gorsh. We really do be living in a society, though. Uh-oh, there goes Peter Frampton's big finale. He's gonna be pissed off. You're damn right I'm gonna be pissed off. I bought that pig at Pink Floyd's yard sale. A dark horse for one of the best Pink Floyd records.
Yes.
Animals.
And guys, in my opinion, in a perfect world, I would say that we would have just ended this podcast right here because the band should have just hung it up at this point. Because, I mean,
I don't know
Good thing
about
this
that.
isn't a perfect world then.
well, and I kind of think that, like, they hit lightning in a bottle with Dark Side of the Moon, and that was sort of a pivotal moment that they realized, like, yeah, we can make this band without Sid, but also, like, I don't think we can ever peak as high as this ever again. And then why not just close us out with a nice tribute to the man who arguably started this whole band off at the beginning? Because at this point, and don't get me wrong, I love Animals. It may be my least favorite out of the ones that I say I love. It's just you start to feel the ego of Roger Waters come into it, come into its own.
Yep. As I like to call it, Animal Farm the rock version.
And it's funny, and maybe Lyle, maybe you'll kind of agree with me on this, but like, while it kind of seems like David Gilmour admires like musicians like Eric Clapton or Jimi Hendrix, I get the vibe Roger Waters listens to like the Sex Pistols, the Clash. Like, he seems like a punk rocker in disguise.
Hey, he seems a little too gentile.
I don't know. He strikes me as somebody that just wants to be in a punk band, like secretly.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
but
I have a
that's
theory on
interesting
that. Where
anyways.
deep down inside, like he's a genius when it comes to lyrics. I'll give him that. But when it comes to music, I feel like there's a bit of like, yeah.
He's a good lyricist.
I don't know. I feel this energy, the energy that he gives comes off like he wants to be a little bit more of like, I don't care about society, or maybe that grew to sort of be his sort of begrudging attitude, because at this point he started to hate playing live in front of like, thousands of people. Yeah, it's really started. He started just to get kind of like annoyed with everything.
Like that's the kind of thing where like if you're a band that goes and plays all around the world, like I mean you could be like the Beatles and eventually just stop playing for people altogether and only release music, but then the downside is no one ever sees you. And again, this is late 70s, so this is still a good 20 to 30-ish years before internet live streaming concerts becomes a frequent thing.
Right.
So but with Pigs on the Wing, the sort of two bookending little acoustic moments, it feels like a weird way to frame it because you basically have the perspective of this person that seems to have found some sort of sincere relationship to appreciate, but then in the middle it's like, oh, society split up into these different animals and it's getting very nihilistic and depressing. But then they'll see it's okay, he has love at the end. Like that's what stopped him from becoming, from going down the rabbit hole. Okay, so
Which is funny because Pigs on the Wing Part 1 and 2 was a love song that he wrote for his girlfriend at the time.
yeah, his I think girlfriend at the time or wife at the time, and they I think they split up a few years later or something. So I'm like, well, guess that didn't work out so well. But this isn't a case of where if you're not necessarily a fan of like sidelong pieces, most of Animals is sidelong pieces.
Yeah, and I mean it's still really good. Like I mean the lyrics in the song or in this whole album, it's very pessimistic. It's a lot more darker if you compare it to Wish You Were Here. I kind of like that sort of night and day contrast between themes. It's just if you got to take it with a grain of salt because it's cynical and it's darker and it's dividing society up into three different types. You got the dogs who are the authority figures.
Yeah, yeah.
You have the pigs who are the money hungry, like higher, like upper class, and then you got the sheep who are just people that go along with everything and don't like to like be confrontational, or sheeple as people like to call it today.
Oh, so that's where the term came from. But I like the line in Dogs, you have to be trusted by the people that you lie to, so that when they turn their backs on you, you'll get the chance to put the knife in. Like, it's not wrong in the sense that, like, there is a lot of paranoia and there's a lot of, like, you can't really ever relax in life because you have to always be looking for who's trying to come up behind you to challenge you. And also the line, and as the fear grows, the bad blood slows and turns to stone. I love the harmonies on that stone part in there.
And you got it. And you get dragged down by the stone.
Oh, stone. And they turn it into a dog's howl. That's fantastic.
That is amazing. I love it. And just the idea of it going from David Gilmour singing to Roger Waters singing after that transformation is really a nice touch.
And then we get into Pigs, three different ones where it's got, a lot more, it's got a grittier guitar line, but it has that haha, charade you are, which Cartman would apparently quote in an episode in South Park. So I'm like, when South Park is referencing you, I think you've got something on your hands. And the talk box solos as well. So it's like, well, wow, now I definitely know why they got Frampton for the Simpsons episode. There's already a talk box solo on this. So, Lyle, what are your thoughts on the bass line of Sheep?
I don't remember that one very well. Unfortunately, I heard this album, I think, after listening to two other Pink Floyd albums, so it kind of bled in. Unfortunately, I don't have the strongest opinions on this album. I think it's good, but yeah, I'll have to listen to it again or something. I'm sorry, I don't remember it very well.
It's okay.
I can understand.
Every song's like 10, 20 minutes long, so it's really hard for me to remember any of it.
It is my least favorite out of the ones I would give an A, but I still like its strong effort that it's going for.
There's those little bits where, like in Sheep, there's how they take the Bible psalm, then they turn that into how religion and politics turn people against each other. All right, everybody, it's over. We found the atheist. And then the sheep rise up and defeat the dogs, but then it turns out the sheep become the dogs, and everything repeats over and over, and everything's cyclical. Like, great message there.
Cool.
I mean, this Animals is a dense record, but like basically saying that your audience is either one of three types of animals isn't exactly gonna win you any favors.
Hmm.
Like
So
it's a
how do you guys rank this album?
I have it at, I'd say decent A. Obviously below
Nah,
Wish You Were
yeah.
Here and Dark Side, but of the big three, of my big three, this is the lowest of them.
Yep, I agree. I
I
give it
gave
an
it a
A, and
B.
that's okay. That's all right. I mean, it was your first time uh, listening to it, right, Lyle?
Yeah, for a lot of these albums, I've heard most of these songs maybe once, so that's probably why I have very little to say about them. But
That's
that's
totally
about
fine.
to
That's totally
change for the
fine.
next one. Yes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Mr. Waters has, at this point, completely taken over the band for better or for worse reasons. Because, yes, we enter into The Wall at the tail end of
Oh
1979.
boy.
Yay. The one album I've listened to more than once.
Look, everyone knows The Wall is a lot. Thematically, obviously, lengthwise, this is essentially a feature film in record length. And just this is, if you thought some of the themes that Roger Waters drew from on previous Pink Floyd records were not obvious enough, here you go.
Yeah, like, I mean, in a, I would, it's, the presentation of this album is just remarkable. I
Absolutely.
I love the range of like even like music that he's dabbling into sometimes. Like there's a mix of like different types of sub genres of rock and roll that he's trying to like portray with here, but also trying to tell a story at the same time.
A not
But
so subtle allegory.
and it took me a long time to sort of realize like what he was going for with the story. I mean, the film definitely gives it a nice perspective. Like, okay, I'm getting it now. A rock star that hates his life, trying to barricade himself from the world by building a metaphorical wall by putting every piece of his life, and that ranges from like his abusive school teacher, his overbearing mother, his wife, you know, da 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 da. And then after, when he feels like he's alone, he thinks, "Wait, was this a good idea? I need to tear down this wall." And when he hits like a low point, he starts to become like a fascist dictator,
Well, it was
and
all a
then he puts
fantasy in his
himself
head.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was.
yeah. Like he gets so deep into his mind that it's. But even with that aside, I found like the sophistication of this album to be really well done. But again, it comes with a price because this completely broke the relationship between Roger Waters and a lot of the band members, especially poor Richard Wright.
Yeah, that's not to mention, the band also lost quite a few £1 million in some business ventures that did not work out, so they had to live outside of the
Yep.
UK for a year so they wouldn't get taxed. Or, here's an idea, pay your taxes. This
Exactly.
happened with Queen in the 80s, it happened with Pink Floyd in the late 70s. What is so wrong with however much money you're making if you just pay the taxes for a year?
Yeah, you'll make it
Hmm.
back.
I mean, it could have been worse. They could have invested in NFTs. Oh God!
Lyle,
Now that I said that,
Since
Lyle, since you are the biggest fan, and I'm sure this is your
Yeah,
favorite
I mean,
Floyd album,
it
tell
is, and I
tell me.
feel a little awkward because you guys are being rather pessimistic about it. I understand
I'm not
though.
being too.
I'm
No, no,
being a
no. I'm not being.
realist. What are you
No,
talking
no.
about?
I love this album. I just hate the fact that it costs the band in the end. Essentially, like for
Yeah.
every good creation, there is a, sort of a bad
Well, every
sort of
band
consequence to it.
eventually reaches the highest note, and this definitely was the highest note.
What
Um,
is your favorite tracks off of this? What are your favorite tracks? I should say.
I think in the Flesh is such a kick-ass opener. I remember when I was a kid, I'd
Yeah.
always like hum that riff, like down, 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 down. That's
Isn't this
Down,
where
hard
down.
rock
we
as
came
fuck.
in?
And then we got another brick in the wall, which is the most radio-friendly Pink Floyd song you'll ever hear, and the one disco song that hasn't aged.
It's so iconic that Principal Prickly loves it.
And it does. And then you have some softer stuff like Mother, which I don't mind. It's pretty good.
I kind of love Mother because Mother, do you think they'll try to break my balls?
Like Doja. Do you think she's dangerous? Yeah. Oh, Young Lust is pretty sweet too. I like that one.
It's
Like
supposed to be a
Gilmore,
parody of the
you're
arena
awake.
rock. Okay.
Yeah. What else? What else? Oh, Hey You, classic. Can't even say anything about
Hey
it. It's
You's a
just.
classic.
You guys ever seen The Squid and the Whale?
I think I've heard of it. I might have seen a little bit
I've
of
heard
it.
of it.
It's a
Yeah.
Noah Baumbach movie, and basically they use that song as a needle drop. It's almost like a leitmotif for the entire film because it's all about a couple who's. It's about family, and the mom and the dad are getting a painful divorce, and the kids. One of them was played by Jesse Eisenberg, and he in a talent show, he plays the song live and he tells everyone he wrote it. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, that's really good, son. We're so proud of you." And then they find out it's a Pink Floyd
It
song.
figures the guy that would go on to create Facebook took credit for somebody else's idea.
That's there you go. And his only excuse is, "Well, yeah, I didn't write the song, but I feel like I would have," or something like that, because he related to it so much. But yeah, takes after his dad. But yeah, that song comes out a lot. Cody, I know you and I need to watch The Warriors, but Run Like Hell feels exact. It would fit so perfectly in that movie.
I love Run Like Hell.
Yeah, it's just like that gated guitar riff, like bling 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 bling. Because and that would fit with the Warriors because the whole movie they got to run like hell to get they got to bop it to Coney Island because they got framed
Yeah,
for a
see,
murder.
if Run Like Hell didn't have the whole fascist breakdown being at the center of it, it would be even better in the Warriors because it's one of the more active songs as well, and that scream again from Careful What That Axe Eugene is back.
Yeah.
The thing with The Wall is I respect that it's an important record, and I did like a lot of it, and I enjoyed it. But at the same time, with every good song, there's a bit of filler that fits the concept, yes, but as a listening experience, doesn't need to be there. Like maybe you lose the Thin Ice, maybe you lose the Happiest Days of Our Lives, maybe you don't need Goodbye Blue Sky or One of My Turns or Don't Leave Me Now. Or
Well, that's the
is there
thing.
anybody out there? Nobody's Home, which I call Pink's favorite things. It's like my favorite things from Sound of Music. He just lists all the stuff he has.
Well, I think that's the thing with most concept albums is that yeah, that not every song is like a big it's not a banger, but they do lead to the atmosphere of the album, and it bridges gaps between each piece. So I get what you mean.
And I definitely get that.
There's filler, but I think it fits at least.
The one thing I will not take away, however, from The Wall is aside from Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which has managed to transcend music itself, the guitar solo in Comfortably Numb.
Yes, I was gonna say we should mention that one.
Comfortably Numb is, again, one of their most significant pieces. I mean, concept-wise, it's just basically about, I guess, sort of having those the opposite sides of Pink's psyche. But at this point, the band's manager is trying to get Pink out on stage. So to counteract the drugs, he injects him with more drugs.
You know, like you do.
It's
But
just a little
the second
pinprick.
guitar solo, it almost brought tears to my eyes. That's how good it is.
Oh yeah, no, it's outstanding. Like
Be no more.
I can't even decide a favorite track in this. Like it's just again, it's sort of the
Okay.
experience of
Are
listening.
you feeling a little sick?
I think this record broke him.
Broke me?
Which going from Stop into, of course, Lyle's wearing a shirt with a specific character on it, The Trial.
The Trial. Oh, I love The Trial.
That is hilarious, but it's also very unique in its own way.
Well, Roger Waters singing
I've
like
said-
4 different characters, bro. That's cool.
I've said it before, but it sounds like that character from The Hunchback of Notre Dame singing at points.
Wait, it sounds like
Troubadour?
Frollo?
No, the
Oh
Troubadour.
no, the Jester,
No.
yes.
Yeah, that guy.
Troubadour.
Yeah, it sounds like him performing.
I haven't watched
With all
Hunchback in
the
full in
puppets and
years.
everything.
I remember a really funny experience I had with this album. It wasn't the first time I heard it, but it was one of the times I had it on where my old apartment, I had 2 roommates and we were sharing a 3-bedroom apartment, and they moved out a month before I did, so I had nothing but an entire apartment for myself I just moved all my stuff into the corner, and I had nothing but white walls around me. And one night I got like so high, and I was listening to the whole album of The Wall, and I remember getting so into it, like rubbing the walls in the middle of the dark. I'm going like, "Is there anybody out there?"
Somebody you must have seen get him to the Greek.
It was like my neighbors were like, "Yes, there's someone out there now. Shut up."
I mean, the character of Pink, I mean, I think definitely when you internalize a lot of stuff that goes on in your life, it's very easy to risk going down that path. And I understand this record being a classic for a reason, but at least in my opinion, it would need some redaction, because while I loved a lot of it, I can't discount how much the stuff that I don't necessarily like does sort of weigh on it. And I know maybe, well, it's intended to show all that ugliness and all the self-loathing and all this other stuff, but and like I had said, you could cut out a good chunk of both things to make it more palatable, at least to me. But I find it's another great, albeit flawed brick in their wall, if you will. But I still suggest people at least listen to it, but with the caveat that it's unlike a lot of what Pink Floyd had done or will do, and it's also a lot. So if you're going to, at least put aside some time for it before you listen to it. Because I still feel comfortable enough giving it an A, like a light A. I like it a little more than Meddle, but I wouldn't listen to an 80-minute album on more than like a few occasions.
I'm kind of the opposite. I love this album.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear some discourse. It's nice to hear some discourse about it, Josh. So don't. I like hearing that kind of stuff, because you're actually the first person to point that out. In terms of like people who have like actual valid criticisms of The Wall, but yeah, I still have to give this a super high A for me.
I'm gonna make one point about this, and then we'll move on, because when you think of The Wall and you think of modern context, you think of a certain bespectacled internet person that did his own version of this the last few years.
God damn it. I thought we were gonna be. I thought we were done with this. It feels like
I ban this topic on my show.
Fuck.
No, I remember it, so you don't want to.
We talked about it in the Nostalgia Critic episode. I think I mentioned it in the first.
And exactly. So if you want to hear any more of that iteration of it, go there instead.
Yeah, please.
No.
Because there's only one Wall, and really no Corey Taylor cameos will save that.
No.
Anywho, after The Wall is torn down,
yes.
Yeah.
As we enter into the 1980s, the cloud reigns over, and the war between Gilmour and Waters has begun.
When Roger Waters
reaches its fever pitch.
When Roger Waters says that maybe. When Roger Waters says, "I think Pink Floyd has had enough, and we will never reach the heights that we had," I kind of agree with him.
This guy took over the band momentarily so much that he wanted final cut in what he was trying to execute.
Oh. Yeah, we were not on the
I
same
thought it
page.
was going to be like this record, the promotional stuff of this could have been edited in Final Cut.
I thought it was, I must not fuck sheep.
I must not think of thoughts.
Context, Roger Waters is
God.
recording a song.
Do you want just half-baked, overly written half-baked backwash of The Wall? Then look
Do
no
you
more
want
than the
80s
final
Pink
cut.
Floyd? Because this is how you get 80s Pink Floyd, or 80s Roger Waters show, excuse me.
Like, there's literally motifs in, like, for instance, what was the song? The Fletcher Memorial House. Literally, the melody of it. The Fletcher Memorial, home of the da-da-da. And I'm just like, that sounds exactly like the cold as a razor blade, tight as a tourniquet.
Well,
it's like,
the backstory
just using the same lyrics.
The backstory for the final cut was that this was supposed to basically be the soundtrack for the 1982 film version of The Wall, but then it got reworked into its own record, although the track When the Tigers Broke Free, which is in the film, is on here.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
I think that's pretty good, but see, with the final cut, for me, that's kind of where the good things about this record end, and my major issues with it really start, because in case you're just joining us, Roger Waters really has some things to say about politics.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say.
Like, I'm gonna cue the Krusty the Clown joke about the Falkland Islands. That's basically the gist of like why this record pivoted from what it was gonna be a Wall like half sequel, and and a lot of it just seems to be reflecting on like what happened to all the stuff about peace in the world after World War II and all this. I'm like, it's you've done this for like 3 or 4 albums now. Let it go.
Yeah, so fuck
Yeah.
all that. We gotta get on with these.
Yeah, that's what David Gilmour says, and not what's it called? Not
Not
John.
now, John, the penultimate album.
Not now, John. That's
That song
like
was
his
pretty
fucking
good.
response to all this is just fuck all that. I'm out.
Yeah. Paranoid
That's
Eyes
his
is kind of
only
like a
singing
weird
credit.
thing with the orchestral stuff. Like Michael Kamen was a great conductor, but I kind of feel like now adding the symphonic stuff into like 80s production isn't great. Oh, then also the vibra slap, it takes me out of it. Like,
Right.
it's not exactly some. And
What?
also like things like "Get Your Filthy Hands Off My Desert."
Is it desert or
That felt
dessert?
like desert. It felt like
Okay.
a borderline manifesto.
Right.
That's what a lot of
I
this.
mean, there's some nice, orchestrated parts in this album, and I think it's showcasing a little bit more singing range with Roger Waters, but to me, it's missing the backbone that is Richard Wright,
But Not Now
and
John has a bingo thing in it. Isn't that funny?
because he got sacked. Like, the guy was going through a divorce at the time, and Roger was just heckling him the whole time just to stay a part of the band, and Richard was saying, you know what, like, The Wall will be my last go-to, but I'll at least like finish this album with you and I'll play live with you, but I'm out after this.
Well,
Well,
Which was a
that's civil
that's
of him.
putting it nicely. No, but I'll explain once we're done with this before the next one. But Two Sons in the Sunset is a really lame way to close this out. I mean, I like
I
Not Now
was
John just
gonna
because the whole
say.
like we gotta get on, gotta get that like the F word being in with a big rockin' choir and stuff and Not Now John, but then you have Two Sons in the Sunset because you know what a song about a potential nuclear apocalypse needs? A smooth jazz sax solo.
I was gonna say, Josh, like I feel like this album ends very prematurely, and then there's 2 more tracks. The final cut has a really nice like finish to it. I'm like, ah. And then Not Now John comes, and I'm like, I like that song. Could have
Yeah,
played earlier, or maybe could have even started
and
the album. I don't know. But then it keeps going and going.
and unfortunately it is not of use to most people, unlike the Energizer Bunny, which is. And it just kind of fades out and I'm just the final cut for me, at least to me, is the worst Pink Floyd record because it lacks the most soul. It lacks the most soul.
Yeah.
It feels
So
hollow.
It
it
doesn't
doesn't
have the
feel
synergy of the band behind it.
it doesn't feel like a Pink Floyd album. It is a Roger Waters solo album. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why it is the only one that is going to be in this tier, but for good fucking reason, it's getting an F.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't go so far with that. I would give it a D.
Just
It's definitely their
the
worst one
the
since
discourse
Ummagumma,
around it and
but
the subtext, I do not actively wish to go back to it. And even with stuff like Not Now John or uh, I have to go back to it now because I already forgot stuff about it. The title track, Not
Welcome to
Now
my world.
John, When the Tigers Broke Free. But the thing is, a lot of it is just like, the Falkland Islands are being invaded, all this bad stuff's happening, won't someone think of the children?
A lot of
It
Simpsons
feels like a lot of
references
somebody
that.
today.
think of the children.
Like,
Welcome to So
animals,
to Speak.
okay, it made sense. Okay, The Wall was a big epic where Pink is a not so subtle allegory for Roger Waters' own issues, but on the final cut, it's just the same themes but with weaker songwriting, and I was already sick of those themes before, so it just compounds everything, and I just loathe it with a passion.
Yeah, I agree with what David Gilmour says about this album. He approached Roger during the recording of the final cut and said, "You know, Roger, there's a reason why we cut these songs out of The Wall in the beginning. Like, there's a reason. Like, why go back to it?"
Yeah. I don't
The
know.
reason why it left such a bitter taste in my mouth.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I gave this album a C, but that's just because I don't have much to say about it. If you guys want to put it in D, I don't know if I'd put it in F, but like D is fine by me if you want.
you're kind of
I would be fine. I gave this an F, but I would be totally fine giving it a very light D.
Okay, we'll set it
But
with a D. But
barely.
it's definitely their worst one since Ummagumma.
I'd say it's worse, but that's just me.
I didn't like
Yeah.
Ummagumma, but
Yeah, this is what I call Pheno, Floyd in name only, and that's a stretch too, I'm sure.
that's cute.
Yeah,
Pheno.
well, you know what isn't cute? Lawsuits, because that's what happened after Roger Waters
Oh
basically left the
God.
band and then tried to sue EMI and the remaining members to prevent them from doing anything else. Obviously, cooler heads prevailed. David Gilmour and Nick Mason got the right to be Pink Floyd, and Roger Waters left with the conceptual rights to the Wall. And of course, that's why anything solo related that has to do with performing the Wall live, it's only him.
Yeah.
But then we get to 1987 and what essentially feels, at least to me, like a David Gilmour solo album, and that is A Momentary Lapse of Reason, which I like to call Pink Floyd's equivalent to Rush's Vapor Trails, in that the original mix is not that great, and while it's not as loudness wars like clipping the mix bad as Vapor Trails, the 2019 mix of this does sort of try to smooth things out a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is an '80s album.
It sure is. It sure
Fucking
is a
hell.
late 80s album.
If you told me, if you told me this was a Phil Collins album, I would believe you.
Oh my God! Now I'm just imagining David Gilmour singing on Susudio.
I would say Phil Collins and Dire Straits. If they had a baby, it would be
See,
A
I would love
Momentary
that.
Lapse of
I
Reason.
would love like No Jacket Required era Phil Collins with Brothers in Arms era Dire Straits. Now I'm just imagining Phil Collins singing Walk of Life.
We're imagining better stuff.
I know, but
Oh my
apparently
god.
on so Signs of Life is kind of like this nice little instrumental opener that has a little bit of theremin in there, which I always could use some theremin. But if we talked about Learning to Fly, it's not a bad
I
single.
really like
Apparently
that one.
David Gilmour has a pilot's license.
I,
No, to me, Learning to Fly is the most overrated Pink Floyd song of all time. I cannot stand that song.
really? Why?
Mm,
No,
Is it because of
I can't
the?
stand it.
Because he ain't got wings.
it's a bit, it's a bit repetitive.
I'll agree with that.
I don't like the fact that like David Gilmour now, even in his later years, he has to rely on like a choir to back him up, and it's a bit gospel, and the guitar work is kind of underplayed, to be honest. Like
It's
Eh,
definitely
I don't. I
it's
just
definitely one of the few Pink Floyd songs that relies on a hook. So I do agree with you there.
I mean, I will agree
yeah.
with Cody in that David Gilmour's strengths as a singer has always been providing harmony, not so much being the center focus, and that's where starting with the Momentary Lapse of Reason, due to the rest of their catalog, it does sort of struggle because he's not always used to being that strong anchor the same way Roger Waters was. Um,
Hmm.
Now, I should mention the original mix of this record. There were a lot of session musicians that were used on this. Richard Wright did come back to the band, but because of the whole legal issues aftermath, he had to be brought on as a session guy, a
That's
session
right.
member.
Yep.
So the
So
2019 mix,
he didn't have that much contribution to this one,
and again, it
unfortunately.
shows. It
Yeah.
feels a little more whole than the final cut. Actually, a lot more by comparison, but it still doesn't feel quite like it's still has some of that quote unquote magic. But the 2019 mix adds in some of his contributions and adds re-recorded drums from Nick Mason because even Nick Mason was not a fan of a lot of the electronic drums that were used on this record. So I feel like that kind of adds to it. I'm like, and then I heard the Dogs of War. I'm like, okay, so it's a 12-bar blues song that has to do with politics. I'm getting flashbacks to the last record that I hated so much.
I don't even like Dogs of War. I just picture like a strutting loser when I listen to this song. Like, yeah, look at me, I'm a badass.
What? What the fuck?
I don't know why.
Okay. I don't even remember this song,
I
but
just
that's hilarious.
To me, this album it feels like an overproduced album that's trying its best to sound like Pink Floyd, but it doesn't have that. It's definitely missing that ingredient that is Roger Waters with its lyrics, because even to David Gilmour's admission, he said, "I'm not really that good of a songwriter," and it shows in the lyrics.
Mhm.
and he has tons of people backing him up in this album to write a song, and it shows. It's just not really their best effort. Like,
No.
despite the fact that there are 3 good songs off of this, I really like. One Slip.
Yes, I was gonna
Uh,
say, Lyle was talking about Learning to Fly being very hook driven. One Slip even more so.
One Slip is way better than Learning to Fly. Their last track, Sorrow. Okay, I might be jumping ahead a bit, but I will give an honorable mentioning. My favorite Pink Floyd live album is Pulse from 1995. Sorrow is incredible in that live performance. So a lot of songs off of Momentary Lapse of Reason, while I'm not too fond of them, they're decent to just kind of below average. They sound really good live. So I'll give it that. They know how to perform these songs really good when they're performing live, but like you said, Josh,
I'm still not sure slap bass works in One Slip though.
Slap into bass. You hit the nail on the head right away. Like, this is an odd era for Pink Floyd in the 80s, where you're going from a Roger Waters solo album to a David Gilmour solo album.
And we were talking about, like, this sounds like Phil Collins solo stuff. Yet Another Movie.
Yes.
Yeah, Yet Another Movie. I definitely hear the Phil Collins tendencies. Absolutely.
It's like, what if you had an old computer that booted up, and then you played some dialogue from One-Eyed Jackson Casablanca over that, and then it sounded like No Jacket Required. And I kind of feel like, to bring the Rush comparisons back, Presto and Roll the Bones, that like late 80s, early 90s stuff, might have taken some cues from a song like Yet Another Movie.
Oh yeah, this was the time where they started using like computer synth voice in their tracks, right?
Oh yeah,
Or was that Division
we'll get to
Bell?
this. Yeah, Division Bell has the
Oh,
Stephen
is that when
Hawking
that
stuff.
started?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
I have some reservations about that.
And towards the end, I'm not super big on Round and Around. Both parts of A New Machine, they're okay, but like the part 2 did not need to bookend Terminal Frost. Like, it could have just cut A New Machine altogether, have Terminal Frost on its own, and even the little like piano line in Terminal Frost, it sounds like, you're waiting for another show to start on PBS. It's like that low, like, background call waiting jingle type of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, Terminal Frost is the other song that I really like. It's a solid instrumental.
Like,
Well-
at the very least, this record tries to actually be more of a proper band effort, even though at the time it was really just 2 people. But I can respect it. It's average, but I might try 1 or 2 songs here. I gave it a C, like a light C.
I gave it a C.
Yep, I give it a C too. Yep. Like, no more, no less. It's definitely better than the final cut. If I had to compare, it's way better. I would listen to Momentary Lapse No Reason any day over the final cut.
Hey, solidarity.
There's just things that are missing. However,
Next.
a mere 7 years later, in the 1990s, here we go. In 1994, you got The Division Bell.
Now, this is
Squidward's
actually
House.
really interesting.
Yes, double Squidward House. I have a soft spot for this album because in my mind, I think this was what was supposed to be, and even in my own headcanon, I think this is the last Pink Floyd album. I think it works really well as a soft rock album, and there's a lot of tracks on this album that clicks with me. And I can actually, and you can hear Richard Wright, now that he's actually back, he has definitely a lot more material to bring to the table. I mean, the song Wearing the Inside Out is the first song that he sang lead vocals in since, I think, Time
And Us and
Dark
Them.
Side.
But still, that had been over 2
Us and
decades
Them,
at that
yeah.
point. So, like,
Yeah.
the Division Bell is where it's their first and really only proper record as a proper trio, but it is so much better as a result. Like, the beginning with Cluster
Yeah.
1, it's like the whole like static, like electromagnetic sounds. That's like, no, it's not broken. It's just the production's that way. But that actually sounded like the most ethereal water theme for a Spiral the Dragon level that I never played.
I think I made that
You're mentioning
comparison
that,
too. Yeah.
I really like that. And then, what do you want from me?
I think Cluster 1 might be the only track that survived not being on the cutting room floor that would wind up in a 20-year later sort of album that we'll get to in a second.
Won't we? What Do You Want From Me had that sort of like Chicago blues thing, which again in '94 when you had grunge just about to hit its crest on the wave, and then post grunge coming later, and then you had hip hop about to become gangster rap and all that sort of stuff. It was kind of a weird direction to take, but it was okay. Apparently,
Yeah.
David Gilmour's girlfriend at the time, now wife Polly Sampson, started to co-write some stuff on this record, and you'll see her influence more on the final record.
Yeah.
And you know what? Her contribution, at least it was a little bit more focused. It wasn't just a scatterbrain collaboration of a lot of different writers as opposed to on Momentary Lapse of Reason. I find this a little bit more coherent, and there's definitely like stuff that are kind of self-reflecting. Like, I mean, the next track like pulls apart. I don't know whether or not it's about either Sid or Roger. To be
I
honest.
think
It
it's
kinda
like
goes
a
back and forth.
three-tier thing. There's a part about
Yeah.
him having to replace Sid very early on in the band, when Waters left, and sort of the aftermath of stuff he's still dealing with, and possibly from his first divorce. So like there's that line like, "Hey you, did you ever realize what you'd become? And did you see that it wasn't only me you were running from?"
I think my favorite track would have to be Marooned, the little instrumental.
I like to call that one the one that won them a Grammy decades later.
Oh, really?
Best instrumental performance, or best rock instrumental performance, yes.
It's about time.
Oh, well, it's
Better
That's
late
all
than
they
never.
get.
Better late than
it's
never.
a nice one. Lyle, weren't you saying that "Take It Back" sounds like a YouTube
I was just
song?
about to say,
Yes.
"Take It Back" is
Yes.
a fucking U2 song.
It's a B-side from like Joshua Tree Octung Baby era. Which isn't
Exactly.
a bad thing, but at that
Yeah, I was
point,
about to say that's not a bad thing. Yeah.
It's not, no.
this is also the
I think
beginning.
I think "Take It Back" and "Take It Back" really bleeds nicely into coming back to life, and that to me is like probably one of the better
Oh yeah,
guitar
I
solos
actually
that David
really came
Gilmour
to
gave.
enjoy Coming Back to Life.
Oh,
One of the most
so
heartwarming
good.
solos I've heard from him. And like there's the cowbell in there. There's the couplet of like lost in thought and lost in time, while the seeds of life and the seeds of change were planted. Just the whole idea that like now that he is with someone who he genuinely cares about, like there's a lot of happiness and good starting to come back to him.
Yeah.
It's a hopeful idea. And then of course we have the late Stephen Hawking in the sample of a British Telecom commercial with "Keep Talking."
Well, we're in the best cuticle right now because all we need to do for a podcast is to
Make sure
keep
we
talking.
keep talking. Tear talking.
No, it's funny. I heard this song a little bit more on the radio after hearing the Division Bell, and it's a good one. It has kind of a groove to it with the bass, or is it bass or is it more echoey guitar? The boom 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 boom.
It could be a guitar riff.
It's good though.
I was going to go back to Maroon for a second. There was a part that sounded
Yeah.
a lot like a Message in a Bottle by the Police, that like sending out an SOS. That's
That
totally
would
different vibes,
fit.
I know.
That would fit.
But
Yeah,
the
they
way
would
the
fit
guitar,
together.
like the
Both
wails
Maroons.
on the guitar had, I felt like that was a major nod to Echoes.
Yep. Yeah, I hear it too. That's what I mean. This album sort of just feels like we're returning back to our roots intentionally because we feel like this is probably gonna be our last stitch effort as a band. And no other song shows more closure than the last track, High Hopes.
Is that the one with
Holy
the,
shit.
Is that the one with
The
the grass
bells
was
are ringing again.
the grass was greener?
The grass was green.
Yeah. This is the one song I remembered off this album.
As
It was good.
many people do, this is one of their best efforts. Yeah, again, Josh, you said it before, like the fat old sun, the bells at the beginning are heard at the beginning
Yes.
while the Division Bell starts. You get lyrics like it's even calling back to see Emily play with an endless river forever and ever. With a river
Remember
flowing.
that.
Yeah, there's an endless river.
There's the
that will come
solo that
back.
sort of reminds me of Welcome to the Machine, and
Yep.
I mean, I kind of feel like if Pink Floyd had ended it here, this would have been their "The Show Must Go On," or I mean, granted, it's not late era Rush, but the track "Time Stand Still," which is basically just about reflecting on life and enjoying it in the moment.
To me, this should have been the last one.
This is the best since The Wall. It's a really underrated record, and I feel like between the three of them, they were on a creative high they hadn't felt in a very long time. But this is over an hour, and you will feel that length. But
Oh god.
I greatly enjoyed my time with it. I would give it a decent to strong B. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I give it a B too. It's
I
solid. I have
I
a soft spot for
I
it.
did not enjoy this album. I feel that
Oh, sorry.
I was sitting in a park trying to listen to it to kind of get into it. I was nodding along.
No, no, you need an open field.
Yeah, but I was feeling the length so bad. I think it's because I've been grinding Pink Floyd for a month, so hearing more songs that are like 6, 7 minutes long was really
Yeah,
starting. I was getting
that's
fed up with
one
it.
beef I've got to let Cody know. When you have to go through a band that like has like even their singular songs get longer and longer as their career goes on, it's not fun.
I don't know, like it was a grind,
I'm
but
sorry.
there's a few standouts, but I gave this one kind of a C. I didn't really dig it, but you guys liked it,
That's
so that's okay.
understandable. That's understandable. No,
I like the
I mean,
last track. I'll give you that. It's a good send off. Could have been a good send off,
like
but
like I said before, like David Gilmour's not really the best strongest songwriter because what's that one song? I think it's called "Lost for Words."
Lost for
There's
words,
that
yeah.
lyric. There's that lyric. So I open the door to my enemies
Enemies
and
and
I
I
ask,
ask, "Can we wipe the
"Can we
slate
wipe
clean?"
the slate clean?" If they tell me to please go fuck myself, you know you just can't
oh
win. I'm
yeah, the
like,
F
oh, I
bomb.
cringe. I cringe. That's cringe. Oh.
Oh, there's a line because there'll be no safety in numbers when the right one walks out of the door, and I'm like, I fixed that for you. Let me put a little W in front of that.
Wait, David, you're saying this song is about Roger? Oh my god!
Yeah.
Who would have
Uh,
thought?
Mm.
and then they did some live stuff in the mid late '90s,
Yeah,
and
like Pulse. Yeah, like
and
Pulse.
like Pulse.
I recommend Pulse. Pulse is a really good time. Like watching it or listening to it. It sounds really good. They play the entirety of Dark Side, and they have a really good string of playing a lot of like the just like the go-to hits, but most of them are kind of in the post Waters era. But like they did have a ad. Oh my god, what the hell is that song called?
Careful with
Ad
that axe, Eugene. Astronomy Domine, one of those.
astronomy dominating that they played that one really good rendition of it actually. Yeah, I was just blanking on the title. And
And
then
time
yeah, it
passes
seemed
on. They go on hiatus.
they performed one last time at the Live Aid of 20 it was
2005.
yeah, it
2005,
was
yeah.
2005. Yeah, yeah. Did you guys watch that? I know
I
I
did
sent you the
watch some of
Uh,
that.
link.
I mean,
no.
even though it was only in London, I felt like anybody that watched that kind of felt like they were, witnessing a part of history they never thought they'd get to see again.
Yeah, a lot of people were shocked that they reunited. What about you, Lyle? Did you see it or?
Not really, but I did see the shot where like Roger and all them kind of come together. And I can sense a little tinge of awkwardness, but at least they, went through with it. I thought that was nice.
It feels like the Division Bell should have been the last proper record where they can end it, at least the three of them. And that live performance felt like if that's the only time the four of them are going to be doing anything together, it was for a good cause, and it felt like they made the best of things.
It was the only
Yeah,
album to reach number one in several countries. I looked at it and I was like, oh my
yeah.
god, I've never seen anything like this before, where it's number one
That
in like
that's a.
tons of
I
countries.
think that I think that more has to do with the fact that it was like the early '90s and like that people just didn't. There was a long gap in between Momentary Lapse of Reason and the Division Bell that
Hmm.
it was just sort of like a very optimistic time of like, whoa, another Pink Floyd album, and
And
you
not to
know,
mention, Pink Floyd was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in '96, and that was like less than 2 years after the Division Bell came out. So it would make sense that to capitalize on like now their comeback into like, most parts of mainstream pop culture, that they would
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, I wish I liked this
Sadly,
album
and
more,
Yeah.
but what can you
yeah,
do?
no, it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It lacks that one ingredient that is Roger Waters.
I think that's the
It needs to be
problem.
sort of a balance.
That
Yeah.
might be the problem with me with this era.
Hmm.
But sadly, in 2006, we lost Sid Barrett, and then in 2008, we lost Richard Wright.
Yeah.
Yeah, both men passed away.
But although we lost Richard Wright that year, that did spark the beginning of David Gilmour and Nick Mason coming together to do a Wish You Were Here Part 2, if you will, their final send off to not only Richard, but essentially what has become the final Pink Floyd record, and that is 2014's The Endless River.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I have very mixed things, mixed to
Oh, good, I'm not alone
below
on this
average.
one.
Oh, Lord.
Because, okay, I get that it's going about it with the best intentions of being a tribute to Richard Wright, because it's a lot of like unused outtakes from the Division Bell, but why not just release a 20-year anniversary of the Division Bell and just add on all those tracks? Why release a full album in this? And it feels reconstructed too, which was kind of a weird vibe to it. It feels
Hey, you
definitely
could
like
just
they
call the
came
box
back and they
set,
retooled
you
it.
could call the 20th anniversary box set Redivided.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Here's my the first thing that I say when if someone would ever ask me how is the Endless River, I would say, well, if you're a student and you're studying in your dorm room and you need some ambience, throw it
Lo-fi
on.
chill beats to study to.
There you go.
Like just
Oh,
it
God.
is total fine serviceable background ambience. It's hard to say a favorite track. It's just like, all right, that's nice, and then it just comes to a complete halt at the very last track when there's actually a fucking song with lost or what is it? Loud for words? Louder than words. Yeah, louder than words.
Because the thing with this record is, and also there is a deluxe edition which has 3 extra tracks and a bunch of music videos. I did not listen to that because I was not going to listen to another one that's over an hour. But they're mainly just sort of TBS 9 and 14, which are like part of the Big Split, which was an unreleased sort of record they were working on. They took some portions of it and used it for the bonus tracks, and Nirvana, which if you want to listen to some of those, I suppose I could recommend it, but this does feel like it's 4 different sides of something that was clearly not going to be that cohesive, because the entire third side is a bunch of ambient interludes.
I think I made the awful mistake of listening to this album right after Division Bell, and it just
no.
bled all together. You know when you have
I
two sheets.
know.
You know when you have a book and then you leave it in the rain and all the ink just melds together, and it's like I can't tell this album apart. And I just walked. I was walking home from my trip to the park, and I came back and I was like, "Oh, the album's over." Okay. I have nothing to say.
Even on the opening track, Things Left Unsaid, the EBO is nice, but it just makes a lot of the record feel like, something you'd hear if you went to a spa. That sort of ambient, nice, new agey stuff in the background that you don't pay much attention to.
It sounds pretty, but yeah, again, you're right. It doesn't stick with me at all. I feel bad for saying that, but it's just...
Even on something like Skins, where you'd think it's a drum solo, I should like that. But then I kind of was like, I'm waiting for Blue Man Group to show up.
Blue Man Group. It's time to start. Yeah.
But then there's like the sort of almost Top Gun anthem-esque guitar solo on Enesina, what I call Rainstorm ASMR, that is the lost art of conversation, which when I think of ambient music, this is the kind of stuff I'm like, I'm just going to listen to the sounds of a thunderstorm and walk around in the spring.
Yeah, it's it feels like white noise sometimes. I don't know.
Isn't there also a track where Stephen Hawking comes back?
Yeah,
yes, Talkin'
he comes
Hawking.
back, yeah.
It's literally, I call it just the alternate take of Talkin' Hawking, it feels like. It's the same bit of the commercial, they just used a different part.
I don't know if I'm weird, but every time I hear like that kind of synthesized voice, not just Stephen Hawking, but I just think of all these crappy YouTube videos I watch where people just use text to speech things and do whatever the hell they want with it. It's like, fucking idiot, go kill yourself, you know what I mean? Stupid internet. But yeah, I'm not a fan of text to speech. It's just, I hate it. But,
So, there were some points where there were interludes that actually, like, referenced other tracks, like a bunch of other latter era Pink Floyd has. Because Allons-y 1 and 2 sort of had that bit of, like, it sounds like a sequel to Run Like Hell.
A little bit. I recall there was a track that kind of reminded me of Run Like Hell.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's strange to say like, oh, this is the last Pink Floyd album. We didn't really ask for this, and what you had in 1994 was a great bitter note to end it off on, because, like, I think the album itself, the cover with those Easter Island heads, is looking down that field at Cambridge University, which is where they all met. So
Yeah, it was
that
fitting.
to me is closure. Yeah, it's fitting closure to it.
Well-
And now we have some jackass in the clouds, fucking
Old
rowing a
man
boat.
yells at cloud.
I don't know how to rank this album, guys.
I don't know, because
I
have it
give
at a
it
decent C.
C.
yeah,
Yeah, to
it's
me, I give it a
average,
C.
but see, the whole thing about centering it around Louder Than Words is it's really like David Gilmour's now at the time now wife Polly Sampson, like she was basically writing this song based around when she saw David and Roger interacting at Live Aid. It was like they didn't say much to each other before they actually started performing, but then when they were on stage, it was like no time had passed at all. And that's sort of the note that they're gonna sort of the band's gonna end on, that even through all the strife and the back and forth, they still played and made great music together. And David Gilmour sort of acknowledging that, yeah, he's obviously not in the band anymore, but we were still really good at the top of our game at one point, and a line like "Let's go with the flow wherever it goes, we're more than alive." So Pink Floyd's always going to live on in the fans' memories and hearts and minds and all that. So it's certainly a nice note to end on because, like again, like Lyle said, this could easily be like the Division Bell too because they run together that much, and for better or for worse, it takes a lot from that record, but it still feels like it's a deserving send off for Richard Wright, as misguided as that concept ended up being to try and make another Wish You Were Here, because you're not topping that in my opinion.
No.
It's a fitting bookend for Pink Floyd because it's fitting that we gave the Piper at the Gates of Dawn a C and the Endless Rivers getting a C, so it's sort of like a full circle that this is sort of an equally fitting, slightly above average finale for an above average debut.
If it wasn't for the fact that this was in honor of Richard Wright, I would probably give it lower than a C, but it's just whatever. I'll give it a C if that's how it is, but yeah. I would have given it a D otherwise.
It makes me think that like whenever it's going to be either Gilmour, Waters, or Nick Mason's time, whenever that'll happen, will there be another Floyd album?
No, but you know what they should do? They should put back all those like experience and immersion special editions of from 2011 when they reissued everything, because they were there for a few years and then they disappeared in like 2015. I'm like, give me the 6-disc version of Dark Side of the Moon again, and the 5-disc version of Wish You Were Here.
And I know for a fact that somewhere out there's HD quality footage of The Wall when they went on tour in 1980.
Give us the Waters cut.
Yes, absolutely. It's out there somewhere.
Coming
we just
soon
need to be
HBO
patient.
Max. I know.
Because
like, what the hell are you even doing here?
Streaming is coming.
It's
a
funny.
long way.
It's funny. Even before recording this, I should have done this. I was thinking about it, but I didn't have time to do it. But it'd be kind of interesting to take songs from Roger Waters' solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, which I haven't heard that yet, but I want to, and take some songs off of David Gilmour's solo album and try to mix together some like mixtape playlist of like just a Floyd album, a quote unquote Floyd album, and try to get that sort of vibe out of it. To see, it'd be a fun experiment to do that. I don't know.
That's interesting. It would almost feel like nothing had changed at all.
I will try that out. No, I was going to say, right now, all we have is 4 or 5 gentlemen that stood the test of time on trying to create something unique and special. And like I said before, like Pink Floyd went through almost like a passing baton situation with all these eras, and a certain sound just sort of carried its way through. And it's kind of fascinating, the story and the journey that this whole band went through. And there's a particular sound in there that resonates with people, and it's commendable for sure.
That goes without saying, yeah, absolutely. It's a reason why they're considered one of the best bands of all time. I actually find it interesting that the way they started out, they weren't like hot off the charts. It took until
it took them a while.
What is like Dark Side of the Moon? Is that like their 6th album or like?
Yeah, something like that. It'd be like their 6th.
Like, and that's when they reached like international 8th album.
Yes.
That's when they reached.
That's what happens when we were still in the times when bands would put out an album a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury anymore. When you're in a band, you gotta make it big within either your first or second album. Sometimes your second album won't even be as good. So that's crazy. Back in the day, you could just keep going and going and going until, oh hey, it's a hole in one. You know?
Well, that's what happens when you play golf with mulligans.
Mulligan. Well, like I'm a gummigans. Is that what they should
Get
call them?
out.
Okay. I barely said anything.
I
I'm like,
think.
give me a chance. Anyways,
Any final thoughts for you guys?
Does,
Like,
an-
I'd love to
does
hear 'em.
anyone care to have my like definitive ranking from worst to best? Anyone care to share theirs or no?
I mean, I have a ranking list. If Josh has a
I
ranking
also
list,
I do as well. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd love to hear them then.
Okay. Yeah, you can do yours first, Lyle, if you'd like.
very well. Okay, so I think we all started at the bottom with Ummagumma. It's got like maybe one highlight, but that was a not fun. Um, I actually have the Endless River next. I just found that to be in one ear, out the other. Then I had the Division Bell, which I didn't really care for much either, but at least it had some things. The Final Cut I only have slightly higher because I remember Not Now John more than anything else I heard up until that point. But I do agree, it's not the best album by a long fucking margin. And then we have a Momentary Lapse of Reason, which, yeah, Learning to Fly I liked. A couple other songs sounded cool too. It's very 80s though, I didn't really like that. Then going past all that crap, we have A Saucerful of Secrets, which was pretty good. I don't remember tracks off by name alone, but if I heard it again, I'd be like, oh yeah, this was a good album. Then we have Obscured by Clouds, which is like, hey, you're on the right track. And then we have Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which I'm kind of starting to be a little bit warmer. I have a warmer opinion of that album, but then again, I think I'd rather just listen to Relics instead, to be honest. Suffice to say. And then we have More. I liked More a lot more than I thought I would. Josh is choking on his water. That was not an intentional pun. It's just an awkward name for an album. Yeah, I like the heavier stuff. It's like, hey, Floyd can really kick into gear sometimes. And then we have Adam Hart Mother, which I really liked. I thought that was like a very, very strongly constructed album, especially with the orchestrations. My God. And then I actually surprisingly put Animals pretty high. I know I didn't have a lot to say, but it's the one album where, even though my memory is kind of drawing a blank, I would happily revisit it again. Then we have Meddle, which is metal as fuck. Great album. I love the ending. I am not a music critic. I'm sorry, but Meddle is the B side alone is worth the price of admission. Then we have Josh's favorite, "Wish You Were Here," which is a very somber album, but definitely well constructed. Um, I can't really tell the first part of "Shine On Your Crazy Diamond" to the second half by the end of the album, but I always remember the refrain. Then we have "Dark Side of the Moon," second place. I think this is one album I will definitely always listen from front to back because it's very rewarding, and I love albums that can do that. And naturally, number one is "The Wall" for me. Still, after all this time, it's the one I will always go back to and remember fondly. And yeah, I love that album. So, Josh, what's your ranking?
All right. Well, now that the worms have eaten into your brain,
Thank you.
now obviously I made no bones about it earlier that the worst Pink Floyd album in my opinion is The Final Cut
Mm-hmm.
because as much as I didn't mind Not Now John, When the Tigers Broke Free was fine, but like that's not enough to save subject matter and like lyrical subject matter that I was already tired of several albums ago, and it was again, it's Floyd in name only, so it doesn't feel like a proper record. Then I had Ummagumma because again, not counting the live stuff, the studio stuff aside, is like 1.5 songs. That does not a great album make.
No.
Then I had a momentary lapse of reason because there were a few songs I would consider coming back to, but again, it still does feel like a Pink Floyd record from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Even the 2019 mix, it was still it did its best to like try and smooth over the 80s-ness, but it didn't do much. Then I actually have more because there were some parts, like we said, the first half is actually pretty solid. It's just the second half runs together, and that's what sort of drops it down a few notches in my book. And then hot take after that, I have The Endless River.
Hmm.
I thought that was a fitting sort of final album for the band, even though, yes, it could have very easily just been a bonus disc on a 20th anniversary remaster of The Division Bell. And then after that, of course, we have where it ended to where it began, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It's a pretty above average debut, even though, again, it's trying to be like it's like trying to be their version of Sergeant Pepper's, but with a little bit more of the psychedelic aspect. But I cannot deny Astronomy Domine, Interstellar Overdrive, and a couple of other tracks on there. Uh, and I definitely like where they started out. I would not rank Relics, but if I did, I would have put it next because it's pretty solid with the B-sides. But the next proper record I have is actually A Saucerful of Secrets.
Ah.
I thought it was really good. I mean, Corporal Clegg's kazoos aside, the title track is pretty epic. I really like Let There Be More Light. Remember Day is pretty solid. Jug Band Blues is a really sort of somber and sobering way to close it out, and it showed that Pink Floyd still had that psychness, but with David Gilmour in the band, they were moving in the right direction. Then, probably even another hotter take, The Division Bell.
Hmm.
I
It's pretty
actually
high for
really
you.
liked it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I really enjoyed a good chunk of it. And again, it felt like the most cohesive and unified record that the band had made in years. Because
Well,
at least now there's all of them are working on stuff together. And the whole theme of communication and everything, I felt like it definitely suited the time. Because at that time, the internet had just kind of come around. So, the whole personal connections with people, the digital versus personal thing, that wasn't as prominent yet as it would be by the 2000s. But I really came to appreciate the Division Bell doing this experiment.
okay.
And then I have Obscured by Clouds after that. I thought it was more than just a soundtrack for a film. It was a proper, enjoyable record. And I would definitely want to revisit that again because I feel like Free For, Childhood's End, Burning Bridges, What's the Deal? There are many tracks I could come back to and really enjoy them. And now we're getting to what I feel are the best of the best in my A tier. Uh, I have Metal at the lowest of the A tier just because as much as Echoes is like Lyle said, worth the price of admission, some of the A sides a little lackluster, but it's still pretty damn great. And then we have his favorite record next, The Wall. Like
Fair
I
enough.
said, I appreciate it. I enjoyed a lot of it, but again, there is some stuff in there that I could do without, and it's pretty long, but I still enjoyed it for the most part. Then I have Adam Hart Mother because the title suite, combined with Alan's ASMR adventures, with some great shorter songs sequenced in the middle, you can't go wrong with that. It's the start of their peak era, and I also feel like it is some of the most refined they would actually get, ironically, which is, it may sound hard to believe, but I really like my time with that. Then, with the bronze medal tonight, Animals. Yes, it's very, very blunt in its theming. Yes, it's very long, but it is very instrumentally rewarding. Like I forgot to mention, the guitars in the last 2 minutes of Sheep are actually that guitar riff is really good, and the whole like iconic image of Battersea Power Station with the inflatable pig and just that symbol of dominant capitalism, and then this little pig, this individual sort of trying to float amongst the danger. I found that to be a very interesting image given the subject matter. And then Silver Medal, the Dark Side of the Moon. I know it's a classic. I know you can play it from front to back and it still makes sense. There may be a few parts that I don't absolutely 100% love and think they're perfect, but it is still pretty damn close, and I would love to go back to this record in a heartbeat because this is something that I'm so glad I got to actually experience in full for the first time. I know I'm almost 30, and I only just listened to The Dark Side of the Moon for the first time in doing this. Can you blame me? I hope no one does. And then obviously my favorite record is Wish You Were Here. Just
That's a
the
worthy choice.
pacing. Like Cody said, if Pink Floyd were to where they call it a career after Wish You Were Here, I don't think anybody would have begrudged them, because this is a fantastic way to sort of pay their respects to their sort of beginnings. And given that that time in the studio with Sid was the last time anyone would see him while he was still with us, it's something that is still timeless, and I absolutely want to listen to that again, just because the Shine on You Crazy Diamond Suite with everything in the middle, the title track, just it's perfect. It's perfect to my in my books.
Cody, do you have a ranking?
Actually, no, I did not want to rank any of these albums because I can't decide on what's my favorite Pink Floyd. I've always said like The Wall would be like my top 3 favorite albums, but it's honestly more of a representation of how I feel about Pink Floyd. But I don't know, I should have just went with Dark Side of the Moon to say it's my 3rd favorite album of all time. I don't know. Pink Floyd to me is just it's pure music to me. And when I said it, I listened to them like 6 years ago when I went through like 8 to 9 months listening to them straight. I'm convinced that to me is peak music in my life, and hopefully something will top that. I mean, I don't want to say hopefully, but like I don't know. That to me was at a time where like music kind of changed for me. There was a few times listening to Pink Floyd albums where I really did sort of drift away, and I was applying like the song lyrics onto my life as well. That actually happened on a train trip going from Toronto to Windsor once, where I was on the train for like 4 hours and I was listening to like pretty much every album from the 70s from Floyd, and my eyes were shut the whole time, and I was just sort of like having like fever dreams. It was so strange. I was just sort of like I was literally watching my own version of Pink Floyd The Wall in my head, but it was all those albums including The Wall. So I can't really say anything else about them other than they're my favorite band of all time, and it's so interesting to know that like no other band has sounded like them before, and no other band has sounded like them since. And that to me is fucking something to say.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good note to end it on. Now, when are we going to do the Rush episode?
Oh
yes. God. Well, yeah, we have to respect our Canadian heritage. Mind our manners, gentlemen.
I will happily go through each Rush album. That's a good idea.
Excellent, because that's less than 40 years, so you're already saving yourself a bunch of time.
Coming soon from So to Speak. Pop Top not included. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being my crazy diamonds for the past month and a half. Just continue to be little animals and little bricks in the wall, and we shall do good as a future band one day.
All right.
That's still going to happen.
Okay. Are you writing the material, or am I going to be the Roger Waters and just steal the thunder from you?
Do it.
Hear me out. What if we all write things together and there's no disillusionment, discordance? Yes.
That's a healthy idea.
I know, right? It's almost
theory.
like people can function in a creative space in a healthy manner.
Yeah.
Like a real band.
We just gotta stay away from the drugs. Or,
yes.
I don't know. Depends.
Oh, you won't have a problem with me on that.
Me neither.
Thank you, Josh, for coming on board Pop Talk for the first time.
Of course. Happy to have been here.
And Lyle, I'm definitely going to be hearing you and seeing you again, so I will see you on the next one, all right?
Yeah, I guess you will see me again, so to speak.
So to speak. I guess if you're not having some poppin' for some talking.
I could use a pep talk more than anything.
And everybody listening, thank you so much for listening, and subscribe to So to Speak. And if you don't, then you can't have any pudding!
Oh, God. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat?
How can you have any pudding if you don't subscribe to So to Speak?
Yeah! Yes, yeah!
Subscribe, laddie!
Tear down the wall! Tear down the wall!
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.